Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto became God Sage Animarium Wielding Rinnegan and fall in love with Princess Shayla and Taylor Earhardt. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Echo of a God. The dust of the Fourth Great Ninja War settled not with a triumphant roar, but with the profound, soul-shaking silence of absolute finality. It was a quiet that was heavier than any scream, a stillness that spoke of a world bled dry. Naruto Uzumaki stood at the epicenter of that silence, a lone figure in a cratered wasteland that stretched to a horizon fractured by jutting, petrified remnants of the God Tree. Before him, the earth was sealed, a hastily formed moon of rock and debris entombing the progenitor of chakra, Kagaya Otsutsuki. A few meters away, Sasuke Uchiha lay unconscious, his own devastating power finally spent, the curse of hatred that had defined his life temporarily silenced by exhaustion and the undeniable reality of their shared, brutal victory. Naruto's body was a tapestry of agony. Every muscle fiber screamed in protest, every sinew felt stretched to the point of snapping. The divine chakra of the six paths that coursed through him was a raging river. But it was a river that was beginning to overflow its banks, threatening to tear him apart from the inside. He could feel it, a terrifying, magnetic pull from the sealed Kagaya and the shattered remnants of the God Tree scattered across the landscape. It was as if the dead god refused to remain so, its disparate parts seeking a new vessel, a new core. And he, the victor, the jailer, was the only viable candidate. He gritted his teeth, the simple act sending a fresh wave of nausea through him. His senses, expanded and heightened by sage mode to a degree that was almost unbearable, felt the life force of the entire planet, the faint, flickering warmth of the allied shinobi miles away, the deep, slumbering pulse of the tailed beasts within him, and the cold, ravenous hunger of the power now converging on his position. It began as a tremor, not in the ground, but in his very soul. A low hum vibrated through his bones, a dissonant chord in the symphony of natural energy he had become so attuned to. Then came the light. Ethereal motes of emerald and gold began to rise from the ravaged earth, drawn from the petrified wood of the God Tree. They spiraled into the air, a reverse snowfall of pure, untamed power. From the hastily made satellite prison high above, a sliver of obsidian energy, Kagaya's last lingering will, pierced through the atmosphere like a vengeful star, arrowing directly towards him. He was too exhausted to erect a defense, too drained to even move. He could only watch as his victory became the catalyst for a transformation he had neither sought nor desired. The streams of light and the shard of darkness struck him simultaneously. There was no explosion, no grand concussive blast. There was only an implosion of reality centered entirely on him. The pain was absolute, a white-hot nova of agony that incinerated every thought, every memory, leaving only the raw instinct to survive. His vision dissolved into a kaleidoscope of screaming colors. He felt his chakra coils, normally as wide and steady as rivers, shatter and reform into something new, something vast and oceanic. The very structure of his being was being unwritten and then rewritten with a divine, terrifying syntax. The nine tails, Kurama, roared within his soulscape, not in anger, but in a primal awe and terror, his own immense power a flickering candle against this cosmic hurricane. Naruto felt a pressure build behind his eyes, a sensation like two new suns being born within his skull. He squeezed them shut, but the light was internal, inescapable. When he forced them open again, the world he saw was fundamentally, irrevocably changed. He no longer just saw shapes and colors, he saw the flow of energy, the intricate web of life and death that connected all things. The very threads of fate itself woven into the fabric of existence. His vision was a tapestry of pulsing chakra, natural energy, and a third, stranger power he could not yet name. In the reflection of a polished piece of shrapnel nearby, he saw his own face. His whiskered cheeks were the same, his features were his own, but his eyes were no longer the familiar cerulean blue. They were now a deep, captivating violet, rippled with concentric circles that seemed to pull in the very light around them. The Rinnegan, not borrowed, not transplanted, but his own, awakened. As the last remnants of the God Tree's power integrated into his system, a new sensation bloomed in his chest. It was not the fiery, boisterous warmth of his own chakra, nor the wild, untamed energy of Kurama. This was a deeper, quieter power. One that felt as old as the world itself. It was the energy of silent forests, of sun-drenched plains, of the deepest ocean trenches and the highest mountain peaks. He could feel the pulse of every tree, the breath of every blade of grass, the collective life force of the planet itself, and he knew, with an instinct more profound than knowledge, that he could command it. This was something beyond sage mode. This was a state of being, a complete and total union with the natural world. A god sage. The transformation settled, the torrent of power slowing to a manageable, continent-sized river within him. The pain receded, replaced by a clarity of thought and a sense of calm that felt utterly alien. His youthful exuberance, the hyperactive energy that had defined him for so long, had been burned away in the crucible of his apotheosis, leaving behind a core of serene, unshakable confidence. He looked at his hands, no longer seeing just flesh and bone, but instruments of creation and destruction on a scale that humbled him. It was in this moment of profound, world-altering change that reality finally tore. The air before him did not shimmer or crack. It simply opened, a wound in the world, silent and absolute, a perfect circle of swirling, impossible colors that led to a place that was not here. It exerted no pull, made no sound, yet its presence was a violation of every law of nature he had ever known. He felt a faint, desperate call from its depths, a plea for help spoken in a language of pure emotion. Before he could even process the thought, before he could even turn to look back at the world he had just saved, the ground beneath him gave way to the impossible void. He tumbled forward, his new, godlike powers inert for a single, crucial moment as one reality let him go and another had yet to take hold. He saw a final, fleeting glimpse of familiar figures cresting the ridge of the crater. Sakura, Kakashi, their faces masks of shock and disbelief, and then they were gone. Swallowed by the closing aperture. He was falling, tumbling through a tunnel of kaleidoscopic light, the silence of his world replaced by the sound of a gentle, melodic wind and the scent of blossoms he had never known. His landing was not a crash, but an arrival. The violent, disorienting tumble through the non-space of the rift ended as he passed through a shimmering, invisible barrier. He fell the last 50 feet into a body of water so clear and pure it felt like falling into liquid sky. The shock of the cool water was a welcome, grounding sensation. He surfaced with a gasp, his long, black and orange coat swirling around him. He pushed his now longer, damp blonde hair from his face, hair that now held subtle streaks of ethereal white that seemed to drink in the ambient light, and took in his new surroundings. He was in the center of a serene, circular pool within a vast, open-air temple. The structure was carved from white stone that seemed to glow with its own inner luminescence. Interwoven with living, ancient trees whose branches formed a vaulted ceiling high above. Waterfalls cascaded down moss-covered walls, their gentle roar the only sound besides the cooing of strange, brightly colored birds. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, unknown flowers, and an overwhelming sense of peace. This place was saturated with natural energy, so much so that it was almost visible, a soft, golden haze that coated every surface. It made the elemental nations feel like a barren desert by comparison. He waded through the waist-deep water to the edge of the pool, pulling himself onto the smooth, polished stone floor. His boots made no sound. The quiet of this place was different from the post-war silence. That had been a void, an absence of life. This was a presence, a silence born of harmony. You are not of this world. The voice was soft, melodic, yet it carried an authority that resonated in the very stone beneath his feet. Naruto turned slowly, standing at the far end of the temple. Partially obscured by the mist of a waterfall, was a woman. She was tall and slender, garbed in elegant, simple robes of white and gold that seemed to be woven from living flowers and moonlight. Her hair was long and dark, cascading down her back like a river of midnight, and her eyes, a gentle, knowing brown, regarded him not with fear, but with a deep, soul-searching curiosity. She held a golden staff topped with a crescent moon, but it was not a weapon, it felt more like a key, or a conduit. Naruto remained silent for a moment, his new senses taking her in. He could feel her life force, a calm, steady light that was intrinsically linked to the massive landmass he was on. She was not just a resident of this place, she was a part of it, its heart and its mind. No, he finally said. His voice calmer, deeper than he remembered it being. I am not. I have watched over the Animarium for 5,000 years, she continued, her voice never wavering. She took a slow step forward. Her movements as graceful as a falling leaf. Never have I felt a power like yours. It is a maelstrom of life, of conflict, of sorrow, yet it is not tainted. It is pure. It feels like the world itself has been given a soul. Naruto glanced down at his own hands, seeing for a moment the phantom glow of the Six Paths Yang seal. It's been a long day. The understatement was so vast it was almost comical. And a faint ghost of a smile touched his lips. The woman inclined her head. My name is Shayla. I am the princess and guardian of this sacred place. The floating island, the Animarium. Floating island. That explained the strange, gentle sway he could feel in the very ground, a sensation so subtle he had almost missed it. He looked past her, through one of the temple's grand archways, and saw not earth and sky, but a sea of endless, billowing white clouds below. They were impossibly high in the air, a continent adrift in an ocean of blue. Naruto Uzumaki, he replied, offering his name. It felt strange on his tongue, a relic of a life that had ended only minutes ago. I don't suppose you know how I got here. A wound, Shayla said, her gaze drifting to a spot in the air where Naruto had appeared. A tear in the fabric of existence. I have felt them before, small and fleeting. But this one was violent. It was not a natural occurrence. As she spoke, her serene expression tightened, a flicker of concern creasing her brow. It was a symptom of a sickness that has begun to spread across the realms. Before Naruto could ask her to elaborate, a change occurred in the atmosphere. The gentle, harmonious hum of the island suddenly faltered, replaced by a jarring, discordant note that scraped at the edges of his senses. The golden light of the temple dimmed, and the pure, clean air was suddenly tainted by a foul, coppery stench of decay and pollution. Shayla's head snapped towards the east, her eyes wide with alarm. No, not here. It has found us. Naruto was already moving, his senses pinpointing the source of the corruption with unerring accuracy. What is it? A poison, she said, her voice now laced with a cold fury that seemed at odds with her gentle demeanor. A blight that chokes the life from all it touches. They are called orgs. He looked at her, then out towards the direction of the spreading taint. He could feel it now, a creeping, cancerous energy that was actively devouring the life force of the island. He had just saved his world, had just inherited the power of a god, and now, thrust into a new one, he was faced with another threat. There was no anger, no frustration. There was only a quiet, resolute acceptance. This was his burden. This was his power. Show me, he said, his violet, rippled eyes glowing with a soft, internal light. The air around him shimmered, not with heat, but with a pressure that made the very stones of the ancient temple vibrate. Let's see what this poison can do against a maelstrom. Shayla looked at him, at this impossible boy who fell from another world, who wielded the power of creation in his hands and spoke with the calm certainty of an ancient mountain. In his eyes, she saw not the arrogance of a god, but the weariness of a soldier and the unwavering determination of a protector. And for the first time in 1,000 years of solitary guardianship, she felt a flicker of something she had long thought lost. Hope. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Blighted Forest and the Ranger's Heart. The transition from the hallowed serenity of the temple to the encroaching sickness was a physical blow. One moment, Naruto was breathing air that was crisp, clean, and thrumming with life. The next, he stepped through a shimmering curtain of Shayla's energy and into a wall of decay. The scent was the first violation, a cloying, chemical sweetness layered over the smell of wet rot, like a mortuary built atop a landfill. The vibrant greens and rich, loamy browns of the Animarium's forest gave way to a bruised palette of purples, sickly grays, and an oily, iridescent black that coated every surface. The very air seemed to have weight, a humid, oppressive blanket that muffled sound and clung to the skin. The majestic, ancient trees, which in the distance stood like silent emerald giants, were here transformed into weeping, skeletal things. Their bark was sloughing off in wet chunks, and a thick, viscous ooze, black as tar, dripped from their leafless branches, sizzling as it hit the spongy, corrupted ground. The symphony of the forest, the chittering of insects, the call of birds. The rustle of unseen creatures was gone. The only sound was a wet, rhythmic pulsing, a sound that seemed to emanate from the corrupted earth itself, like the slow, labored heartbeat of a dying world. Shayla moved with a silent, sorrowful grace, her white robes seeming to repel the filth around them. Her face, once a mask of serene contemplation, was now etched with a pain that was deep and personal. She ran a hand over the trunk of a dying tree, her fingers coming away slick with the black ooze. "They do not just kill," she whispered, her voice a fragile thing in the oppressive silence. "They defile. They mock life by twisting it into a parody of itself." For her, this was not just a forest, it was a part of her, and its agony was her own. Naruto's senses, now operating on a level that was almost beyond his comprehension, processed the scene with a chilling clarity. His Rinnegan saw not just the physical decay, but the energy behind it. The natural energy of the Animarium, which flowed like a golden river through the healthy parts of the island, was being actively consumed here. He could see it being siphoned off, drawn into grotesque, pulsating sacs of shadow death. Chi squirmed just beneath the surface of the soil. The blight was not just a poison, it was a parasite, a living entity that was feeding on the island's life force. The air itself was thick with microscopic spores of this malevolent energy. Each one a tiny seed of corruption seeking purchase. But as he walked, a strange thing began to happen. The very ground beneath his feet resisted the change. A small, perfect circle of vibrant green followed him, the corrupted soil purifying itself in his presence, the spongy black marsh receding to reveal soft, healthy earth from which tiny blades of grass instantly sprouted. It was an unconscious effect, a passive aura of vitality so powerful that the blight could not maintain its hold near him. "This way," Shayla urged, pointing deeper into the morass where the pulsing was strongest. "The heart of the corruption. If we do not stop it here, it will consume the entire eastern quadrant by sunrise." They moved with a preternatural speed, Naruto's long coat barely stirring as he glided over the corrupted ground, his personal oasis of life moving with him. They broke through a stand of skeletal trees and into a clearing that was a festering wound in the heart of the forest. In the center of this blighted amphitheater were two figures that defied all natural law. One was a hulking, asymmetrical horror, a creature that looked as if a deranged god had tried to build a dozen different animals from memory and then stitched the mismatched parts together in the dark. It had the powerful leg of a rhinoceros, the sinewy arm of a gorilla ending in a crab's pincer, the head of a snarling wolf, and a patch of shimmering fish scales on its back. It was constantly in motion, its parts seeming to war with each other, a leg twitching spastically while an arm swung in a different direction. This was Jigsaw Org. Its companion was a monument to industrial pollution. A monstrosity of rusted metal and whirring blades, Turbine Org was a walking smokestack. Its head was a massive, fan-like turbine that spun with a deafening, metallic shriek, belching a thick, greasy black smoke that killed everything it touched. Its body was a chaotic mess of pipes and gears, all grinding and clanking in a cacophony of unnatural industry. They were not merely monsters, they were ideologies given form. One was the perversion of nature, the other its replacement by soulless machinery. Between them, they were methodically ripping a colossal, ancient tree from the ground, its roots, thick as a man's torso, snapping with sounds like gunshots. "They are Duke Orgs," Shayla breathed, her voice tight with a mixture of hatred and fear. "They are the generals of the blight, each one a manifestation of humanity's darkest impulses towards the world." Before Naruto could act, before he could even fully process the sheer wrongness of the creatures before him, the sky was split by a flash of brilliant yellow light and the piercing shriek of a bird of prey. A golden, eagle-shaped aircraft, its metallic feathers gleaming even in the dim, polluted light, dove from the clouds. Twin beams of focused energy, like miniature suns, lanced down from its wings, striking the ground near the two Duke Orgs and erupting in showers of sparks and corrupted earth. The Orgs roared in anger and surprise, turning their attention skyward. As they were distracted, a figure ejected from the cockpit of the jet. A streak of yellow and black against the gray sky. The figure executed a flawless series of mid-air somersaults before landing in a perfect three-point crouch between the Orgs and the beleaguered ancient tree. She rose to her full height, and Naruto could see that it was a woman, clad in a sleek, yellow and white uniform with a helmet stylized to resemble the head of an eagle. In her hand, She held a golden dagger that crackled with latent energy. Had enough fun, boys. Her voice, filtered through her helmet's communicator, was sharp, confident, and carried the unmistakable cadence of a trained soldier. It was laced with fatigue, but underpinned by a core of unyielding iron. Class is in session, and today's lesson is on extinction. This was Taylor Earhardt, the Soaring Eagle, the Yellow Wild Force Ranger. And she was hopelessly, heroically outmatched. Dozens of smaller, humanoid creatures boiled up from the corrupted ground around the Duke Orgs. They were the putrids, the foot soldiers of the Org army, their bodies a disgusting amalgam of black slime and twisted vines. They swarmed towards Taylor, their movements jerky and unnatural. She met them head-on, a whirlwind of motion. Her fighting style was a thing of beauty and brutal efficiency. She moved with the grace of an acrobat and the precision of a surgeon, her golden eagle sword a blur in her hands. She would parry a clumsy strike from one putrid, use its body as a springboard to launch herself into the air, and come down with a spinning kick that decapitated 3 more. She was a phenomenal warrior, fighting with a courage that bordered on madness, but it was a losing battle. For every 10 she cut down, 20 more seemed to bubble up from the mire. Turbine Org grew tired of the game. Its central fan began to spin faster, the shriek rising in pitch until it was physically painful. It inhaled deeply, sucking in the corrupted air, and then blasted it forth in a concentrated jet of black, toxic wind. Taylor saw it coming. She stabbed her sword into the ground to anchor herself, but the force of the blast was immense. It ripped her from her footing, sending her tumbling through the air. She slammed into the trunk of a dying tree with a cry of pain, and her sword clattered to the ground several feet away. She slumped to her knees, sparks flying from her suit as her protective energy field flickered and died. Jigsaw Org laughed, a horrible, wet, tearing sound. Now we take you apart, Ranger. Piece by piece, it lumbered towards her, its crab pincer snapping hungrily. Shayla gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Taylor. She started to run forward, but a calm, steady hand on her shoulder stopped her. She looked back and saw Naruto step past her. He didn't run, he walked, with a slow, deliberate pace that was more intimidating than any charge. The circle of pure, green earth moved with him, a vibrant, living island in a sea of death. He walked through the swarming horde of putrids, and they recoiled from him as if from a fire, the very air around him a poison to their poisoned bodies. They shrieked and dissolved into black sludge wherever his aura touched them, melting away without him ever laying a hand on them. Taylor looked up, her vision swimming. Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, she saw him. A tall figure in a long, black coat with orange flames licking at the bottom. His blonde hair, streaked with an ethereal white that seemed to gather the dim light, framing a face of impossible calm. He stopped between her and the advancing Duke Orgs, his back to her. He hadn't drawn a weapon, hadn't assumed a fighting stance. He just stood there, a silent, immovable object against an unstoppable tide of filth. Who are you? She managed to gasp out, training screaming at her that this was an unknown, an unaccounted for variable in a critical situation. Naruto didn't turn around. His attention was fixed on the 2 abominations before him. His Rinnegan eyes, which Taylor could not yet see, were cataloging every detail of the Orgs with a god's eye view. He saw their corrupted energy cores, the flawed, unstable way their forms were held together. The chaotic frequencies of their power. He saw their weaknesses laid bare, not as possibilities, but as absolute certainties. Just a traveler, he said, his voice a low, placid river in the midst of the chaotic storm. Jigsaw Org tilted its wolf head. A traveler. You have traveled to your grave. It charged, its mismatched limbs moving with a surprising, ground-shaking speed. Its gorilla arm swung a massive, club-like fist aimed at turning Naruto into a red smear on the corrupted landscape. Naruto didn't move. He simply raised his right hand, palm open. The fist, which could have pulverized solid rock, stopped dead a single inch from his palm, held fast by a force that was completely invisible. The air around Naruto's hand shimmered, and Jigsaw Org's immense forward momentum was utterly negated. The Org roared in frustration, pushing with all its might, its muscles bulging, but it was like trying to push over a mountain. My turn, Naruto said, his voice still devoid of any emotion. He clenched his fist. The invisible force reversed its polarity, no longer pushing, but pulling. Jigsaw org was yanked forward, off balance and helpless. Naruto's other hand shot out, not in a punch, but in a simple, open-palmed strike to the creature's chest. It looked like a gentle tap, but upon contact, a spiraling vortex of blue energy erupted from his palm. The Rinnegan. It did not explode. It drilled. The sound of 1,000 drills grinding through rock and metal filled the clearing as the perfectly controlled rotation of chakra tore through the org's unnatural flesh. But Naruto wasn't just destroying it. The pure, life-affirming energy of the Rinnegan was anathema to the org's corrupted form. It didn't just break its bonds, it unraveled them. With a final, agonized shriek, Jigsaw org fell apart, its disparate pieces dissolving into piles of inert, organic sludge. Taylor stared, her jaw slack beneath her helmet. She had fought dozens of orgs. She and her team had struggled, bled, and nearly died to defeat creatures far weaker than that Duke org. And this stranger, this traveler, had just unmade it with a single, contemptuously easy touch. Turbine org, seeing its companion so effortlessly dismantled, screeched in fury. The turbine on its face spun into a crimson blur, and it unleashed a torrent of fire, a superheated jet of burning oil and toxic fumes that turned the very air to shimmering glass. Naruto stood his ground. He held up his left hand this time. As the firestorm washed over him, it did not burn him. It was absorbed. A swirling, translucent barrier in front of him drank in the flames. The heat, the energy, pulling it all into the seal on his palm. The Preta path. He absorbed the entire attack without so much as flinching, the sheer volume of energy ousing his coat to whip about him dramatically. When the attack ended, he stood completely unharmed in a newly formed crater of molten glass. He lowered his hand and looked at the stunned turbine org, a flicker of something almost like pity in his violet eyes. All that power, he said, his voice resonating with the energy he had just absorbed. Wasted on destruction. Let me show you what real power is. He clapped his hands together. It was not a thunderous clap, but it seemed to shake the very foundations of the Animarium. He channeled the stolen energy from Turbine org, mixing it with his own sage-infused chakra, and poured it into the earth. The ground began to tremble violently. From the purified soil around him, great pillars of wood, thick and gnarled as the limbs of ancient gods, erupted into the air. They were not dead timber, but living, vibrant wood, covered in leaves and blossoms that bloomed and died in the space of a heartbeat. The pillars grew and twisted, weaving Thames elves together into a lattice of impossible size, forming a perfect, inescapable cage around the turbine org. But it was more than a cage. As the wood touched the org, it did not crush it. It began to grow into it, forcing its way into the seams of its metal plates, wrapping around its gears, clogging its pipes. The life-giving wood was actively deconstructing the soulless machine, prying it apart from the inside out. The turbine org's shrieks became choked, sputtering groans as green leaves began to sprout from its exhaust ports and vibrant, pink cherry blossoms bloomed from the center of its turbine. In a matter of seconds, the terrifying industrial monster was completely encased, transformed into a grotesque but beautiful statue of wood and flowers, its internal mechanisms silenced forever. Then, with a final, shuddering groan, the wooden prison imploded, crushing what was left of the org into a compact ball of scrap metal and mulch. The clearing fell silent. The oppressive, rhythmic pulsing of the blight was gone. The air, while still foul, was no longer actively malevolent. Where Naruto stood, the circle of green grass was now 10 meters wide, and the first tentative shoots of new life were beginning to poke through the sludge further out. The healing had begun. Naruto turned, his violet, rippled eyes finally landing on Taylor. He walked over to her and offered a hand. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind struggling to reconcile the gentle, almost shy expression on his face with the apocalyptic display of power she had just witnessed. She reached out and took his hand. His grip was warm and firm, and as he effortlessly pulled her to her feet, she felt a strange, calming energy flow from him into her, soothing the ache in her bruised ribs and clearing the fog from her head. "You're hurt," he stated simply. He raised his other hand, and a soft, green aura enveloped it. He held it just over her chest where she had hit the tree. The pain vanished instantly, replaced by a comfortable warmth. How? she stammered, finally finding her voice. "Let's just say I'm a pretty good doctor," he said, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through his serene composure. It was a smile that transformed his face, reminding her that beneath the godlike power, he looked to be around her age. She reached up and deactivated her helmet. It retracted with a soft hiss, revealing a face framed by short, practical blonde hair, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of shock, gratitude, and intense, professional curiosity. She was beautiful, but it was the beauty of a hawk, sharp, focused, and utterly without artifice. "Taylor Earhardt," she said, her voice now clear and direct, the soldier reasserting herself. "United States Air Force, and Yellow Ranger. Who the hell are you?" Before Naruto could answer, Shayla glided to their side, her eyes shining with unshed tears of relief and awe. "He is a miracle, Taylor. A gift sent to us when we needed it most. He is Naruto Uzumaki." Taylor's eyes narrowed slightly, her gaze shifting between the serene princess and the impossibly powerful stranger. Her military training made her inherently suspicious of things she couldn't explain. And Naruto was the biggest unknown she had ever encountered. But he had also saved her life and single-handedly neutralized a threat that would have required her entire team and their Zords to overcome. And there was something about him, a deep, profound calm that was both unnerving and incredibly attractive. It was the calm of the sky at 30,000 feet, the absolute, unshakable confidence of someone who knew, without a shred of doubt, that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. "A gift," Taylor repeated, her eyes locking with Naruto's. She saw the strange, lead pattern in their violet depths up close now. They were mesmerizing, ancient. "We'll see about that. You have a lot of explaining to do, Naruto Uzumaki." Her tone was demanding, but there was an undercurrent of something else there now, respect. It was the respect of one warrior for another, a recognition of competence that transcended any questions of origin or allegiance. Naruto simply nodded. "I know." He looked from Taylor's sharp, inquisitive face to Shayla's gentle, hopeful one. For the first time since he had arrived in this strange, new world, he felt a flicker of something familiar. A sense of connection, of a shared purpose. He was a protector. They were protectors. Perhaps he had landed in the right place after all. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of rushing feet and the crackle of communicators. 5 more figures, clad in uniforms of red, blue, black, and white, burst into the clearing, their weapons drawn. They stopped short, their collective gazes ling on the bizarre scene before them. Their princess and their teammate, standing unharmed next to a strange man in a black coat, in a clearing filled with the bizarre, flower-covered wreckage of 2 Duke orgs. The one in red, his helmet styled after a lion, stepped forward, his posture radiating a mixture of aggressive confidence and confusion. He was the leader, his gaze fixed on Naruto, zeroing in on the impossible, otherworldly eyes. He raised his weapon, a powerful-looking blaster. "Get away from them," the Red Ranger commanded, his voice a low growl of authority. He took a half-step closer, trying to place himself between Naruto and the women. "Taylor, are you all right? Who is this? What are you?" Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Sanctuary and the Suspicions of Lions. The air in the blighted clearing crackled, thick with unspoken questions and the low thrum of 5 active morphers. The Red Ranger's stance was a study in controlled aggression, feet planted wide, body angled to shield Taylor and Shayla. His lion blaster held in a steady, 2-handed grip. It was the posture of a man who had faced down monsters and was now confronted with something he couldn't categorize, which, to his mind, made it infinitely more dangerous. His voice, amplified and distorted by his helmet, carried the growl of his totem animal. "I won't ask again. Who are you?" Naruto's gaze, calm and unnervingly ancient, swept over the newcomers. His Rinnegan didn't just see 5 costumed figures, it saw the intricate flow of energy connecting them to the very island, 5 distinct threads of power that pulsed with the spirits of the wild. He saw the fiery, courageous heart of the lion, the swift, playful arrogance of the shark, the steadfast, immovable soul of the bison, and the graceful, cunning spirit of the tiger. They were anchors, conduits for the primal power of this world. It was a fascinating, beautiful synergy, and he felt a pang of academic curiosity that was entirely at odds with the weapon pointed at his chest. Before he could formulate a reply that would de-escalate rather than inflame, Taylor stepped forward, moving with a stiff, deliberate motion that placed her slightly in front of Naruto. It was a subtle but clear gesture of protection. "Stand down, Cole." Her voice was flat, the tone of a pilot reporting flight conditions in a storm. "He's not hostile. He just appeared out of nowhere and you're telling me to stand down." Cole shot back, his helmet shifting to focus on her. "I'm looking at the wreckage of 2 Duke orgs that have given us hell for weeks. That's not non-hostile. That's unprecedented power. We need to know what we're dealing with." A new voice, laced with a youthful, almost giddy energy, crackled over their comms. "Unprecedented. Cole, that's the understatement of the century. Did you see this wood thing?" The Blue Ranger, his helmet modeled after a shark, was circling the bizarre, flower-covered statue that had once been Turbine Org. He p-ocked it with the tip of his shark-fighting fins. "This is insane. The energy readings are off the charts. It's like a nuke and a botanical garden had a baby." "Max, focus," chided a softer, more melodic female voice. The White Ranger, her posture one of poised readiness rather than aggression, took a step forward. "Taylor, your vitals were spiking, then they stabilized. Are you injured?" "I was," Taylor stated, her gaze flicking back to Naruto for a fraction of a second. "He healed me." That simple statement landed with the force of a physical blow. The Ranger's powers came from the Animarium, a source of life. But their abilities were primarily destructive in application. They could fight the blight, but they couldn't reverse its effects or heal its victims with a simple touch. The final member of the team, the hulking Black Ranger, finally spoke, his voice a low, gentle rumble that seemed to vibrate in the ground itself. "Shayla, are you all right? You look pale." He was looking past the stranger, his concern focused entirely on the princess. Shayla, who had been watching the exchange with a kind of dazed wonder, glided forward, her presence instantly commanding a level of respect that even Cole's leadership couldn't. She placed a gentle hand on the barrel of Cole's blaster, gently but firmly pushing it downward. "Cole Evans, there is no threat here." Her voice was soft, but it carried the absolute authority of the island itself. "Only a deliverance. Put down your weapon." Cole hesitated for a long second, the tension in his shoulders warring with centuries of ingrained duty to the princess. With a frustrated sigh that was audible even through his helmet, he lowered the blaster, though he did not holster it. The other Rangers relaxed their stances, their curiosity finally outweighing their combat readiness. "All right, Princess," Cole said, his voice still tight. "But you need to tell us what's going on. What is he?" The question was directed at Shayla, but his helmet remained fixed on Naruto. Naruto met the unseen glare without flinching. He could feel the man's emotions radiating off him in waves. Suspicion, fierce protectiveness, confusion, and a deep-seated instinct that screamed at him that Naruto's very existence was a violation of the natural order he understood. It was the reaction of a wolf encountering a creature it could not scent. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said, his voice cutting through the tension with a quiet finality. "I am not your enemy. I arrived here by accident, and I mean you no harm." He looked from Cole's rigid posture to Taylor's guarded expression. Then to the others. "Your world is beautiful. I have no wish to see it poisoned." There was a sincerity in his tone, a weariness that spoke of battles far older and more terrible than the ones they were fighting. That gave even Cole pause. "Let us return to the Turtle Cove," Shayla declared. "The air here is still sick. We will speak where the island's heart beats strongest." She turned and began to lead the way, her trust in Naruto so absolute that she didn't even look back to see if he would follow. Taylor gave Naruto a short, sharp nod, a silent order to follow the princess. As he began to walk, the circle of vibrant green grass moved with him, a bizarre, mobile miracle that had the other Rangers staring in disbelief. "Dude, did you see that?" Max, the Blue Ranger, whispered, jogging to catch up with the White Ranger. "The ground is unrotting where he walks. How cool is that?" "It's not cool, Max, it's impossible," Alyssa, the White Ranger, replied, her voice a low murmur. Her helmet was tilted, and Naruto could feel her analytical gaze on him, a stark contrast to Cole's primal suspicion. She wasn't judging him, she was studying him, trying to solve the equation he presented. The energy required to spontaneously reverse entropy on a molecular level like that, it's staggering. The journey back to the sanctuary was a surreal procession. Shayla led, a beacon of white in the encroaching gloom. Naruto followed, his personal oasis of life a stark visual reminder of his power. Taylor walked near him, a silent, watchful guardian, while the other 4 rangers formed a loose, wary perimeter around them. The silence was broken only by the squelch of their boots in the corrupted mire and the distant, mournful creak of dying trees. As they walked, Naruto focused his senses, not on his escort, but on the island itself. Beneath the surface layer of ordered corruption, he could feel the deep, resonant pulse of the Animarium, a thrum of life so profound. It made the sage energy of his own world feel thin and diluted. He could feel the great beasts, the Wildzards, slumbering in their hidden lairs, their life forces intertwined with the island and with the 5 humans walking beside him. They weren't just piloting machines, they were bonded, symbiotic partners. The Red Ranger didn't just fight like a lion, a part of his soul was a lion. It was a revelation that explained Cole's territorial aggression perfectly. They soon passed the demarcation line where the blight ended and healthy forest began. The transition was as abrupt as stepping from a morgue into a greenhouse. The oppressive weight in the air vanished, replaced by the clean, crisp scent of pine and damp earth. Sunlight, which had been a diffuse, sickly yellow through the polluted haze, now streamed through the dense canopy in brilliant, golden shafts, illuminating a world teeming with vibrant life. Strange, jewel-toned insects buzzed through the air, and the branches above were alive with the chatter of creatures Naruto had never seen before. Danny, the Black Ranger, let out a soft sigh of relief, his massive shoulders slumping slightly. "It's good to be back in the green," he rumbled, his affection for the natural world palpable. As they passed a bed of pale, moon-petal flowers, he noticed something odd. The flowers in the direct path Naruto had taken seemed healthier, their colors more vibrant. Their petals unfurled a little wider than their neighbors. He looked at Naruto's back, his gentle eyes filled with a quiet, growing wonder. Alyssa, ever the observer, noticed it too. She also noticed the way Naruto moved. He wasn't walking on the path. He was gliding just above it, his feet never seeming to touch the ground unless he consciously chose to. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it spoke of a level of energy control she couldn't begin to fathom. She decided a direct, non-confrontational approach was best. "Your abilities," she began, her voice calm and even, "the healing. The horticulture," she gestured vaguely at the wooden prison in the distance, "they seem tied to life energy. Is that an accurate assessment?" Naruto turned his head slightly, his violet eyes meeting her helmet's visor. He was impressed by the question. It was precise, intelligent, and devoid of the fear or aggression the others displayed. "Very accurate. In my world, we call it chakra. It is the physical and spiritual energy that exists in all living things. I can mold it, shape it, and I can borrow energy from the world itself." Sage mode, Taylor supplied from his other side, recalling a term he had used in passing during their brief, post-battle exchange. "Yes," Naruto affirmed, "an enhanced state. Here, it feels different. Stronger. This entire island is overflowing with natural energy. It's like breathing pure oxygen after a lifetime of city smog." His explanation, while raising a dozen more questions, seemed to satisfy Alyssa for the moment. It provided a framework, a lexicon for his power, moving it from the realm of terrifying magic to a science she just didn't understand yet. They soon arrived back at the central temple, the heart of the Animarium. The cascading waterfalls, the glowing white stone, the immense, sky-piercing trees all stood in serene, majestic contrast to the blighted hellscape they had just left. The other rangers, even Cole, seemed to draw strength from the place, their postures becoming less rigid. They all deactivated their helmets in unison, revealing their faces. Cole Evans was intense, his dark hair wild and untamed, his brown eyes holding a feral alertness. Max Cooper, the Blue Ranger, had a cocky, confident smirk and mischievous blue eyes. Danny Delgado, the Black Ranger, was his opposite, his broad, kind face and gentle brown eyes radiating a quiet strength. And Alyssa Enrele, the White Ranger, had a warm, intelligent face, with kind, dark eyes that were constantly observing, analyzing, and understanding. Cole's gaze was still hard as he stared at Naruto. "All right, we're here. Talk. Everything." Start with how you got here and end with what you are. Naruto walked to the edge of the central pool, the clear water reflecting his strange, rippled eyes. He looked at the 5 rangers, then at Shayla, who gave him an encouraging nod. He had told them his name. Now they wanted to know his story. He had no reason to lie. But the truth was so fantastical it was barely believable. My world was different, he began, choosing his words carefully. It was a world of shinobi, warriors who use the chakra ISP. Okav to perform feats you might call magic. We call them jutsu. He paused, letting the concept sink in. For generations, my world was trapped in a cycle of hatred and war. We just fought the final battle of the greatest war in our history. A war to save the world from a being who was less a person and more a god of destruction. He looked down at his own hands, the memory of Kagaya, of the god tree, of the absolute planet-shaking power that had been unleashed, flashing through his mind. We won. My friend and I, we sealed her away. But in the aftermath, the power that was released, it was too much. It converged on me. It changed me. He gestured to his eyes. It gave me these. And in that moment of transformation, a hole was torn between your world and mine. I fell through. That is the simple truth. Max whistled, a low, impressed sound. So you're saying you fought a god, won, got a major power-up, and then accidentally fell into our dimension. Dude, that is the most metal origin story I have ever heard. Max, Alyssa chided gently, though her own eyes were wide with fascination. The power he wields feels pure, Shayla added, her voice resonating with conviction. It feels like the Animarium itself, concentrated into a single soul. When he arrived, I felt the island rejoice. There are prophecies, ancient legends from before my time, of a guardian who would come from beyond the sky. Not a ranger, but something else, a sage of worlds, who would be nature's ultimate champion in its darkest hour. Cole scoffed, shaking his head. Prophecies. Princess, with all due respect, we can't bet our world on prophecies. We need facts. He took a step towards Naruto, his gaze unwavering. You defeated 2 Duke Orgs like they were nothing. That's a fact. You healed Taylor with a touch. Fact. A power like that is terrifying. It could corrupt. It could turn. How do we know we can trust you? How do we know you're not just a different kind of monster? The accusation hung in the air, sharp and heavy. It was a valid question, one born of a warrior's pragmatism. Naruto didn't react with anger or offense. He had faced that same suspicion his entire life, first as a Jinchuriki, then as a wielder of powers no one else could comprehend. He simply met Cole's gaze and gave him a sad, small smile. You don't know, he said softly. You have no reason to trust me. Trust isn't given, it's earned. I am not a monster. But I have monsters inside me. I have fought them my entire life. I have won. His voice, though quiet, carried an absolute, unshakable conviction that silenced Cole's protest before it could even form. I can't prove my intentions to you with words. So let me show you. He turned back to the pool. The rangers tensed, unsure of what he was about to do. He dipped his fingers into the crystal clear water. He closed his eyes, not needing them for what he was about to do. He reached out with his chakra, not his own, but the pure, natural energy of the Animari. That now flowed through him as easily as his own blood. He felt the spirits of the 5 great animals connected to the rangers, their primal essences, their pride, their strength, their grace. Then, he molded that energy. The water of the pool began to stir, not randomly, but with a deliberate, artistic purpose. It rose from the surface, defying gravity, forming 5 distinct, swirling columns of liquid. With a grace and control that was breathtaking, Naruto sculpted the water. It solidified, not into ice, but into a form of crystalline, living water that refracted the light into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Before the stunned eyes of the rangers, 5 perfect, life-sized replicas of their wizards took shape. The red lion, its watery mane flowing as if in an unseen wind, let out a silent, majestic roar. The yellow eagle spread its shimmering, liquid wings, every feather perfectly defined. The blue shark swam through the air, its body sleek and powerful. The black bison stomped a translucent hoof, its form radiating steadfast strength. And the white tiger crouched, its striped, crystalline body a perfect image of fluid, predatory grace. They were not mere statues, they seemed alive. Their heads turning to look at their ranger partners, their eyes glowing with a soft, internal light. The rangers were speechless. Danny and Max looked like children on Christmas morning, their faces filled with pure, unadulterated joy. Taylor's professional mask cracked, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips as she looked at her eagle. Alyssa was murmuring to herself, trying to comprehend the physics of what she was seeing. Her scientific mind completely enthralled. Even Cole was stunned into silence, his aggressive posture forgotten as he stared at the magnificent, watery replica of his red lion. It was an act of creation, of beauty, of profound understanding. It was not the act of a monster. This, Naruto said, his voice still quiet as he opened his eyes, is what I am. I can destroy, but I would always rather create. The tension finally, irrevocably broke. The watery sculptures held their form for another moment before collapsing back into the pool with a gentle splash, leaving no trace of their existence save for the dumbfounded expressions on the faces of the Wild Force Rangers. Just as a relieved smile touched Shayla's lips, she gasped, a sharp, ragged sound of pure agony. She staggered back, her hands flying to her temples, her face twisted in a mask of pain. The serene light of the temple flickered, and a cold wind, smelling of dust and decay, swirled through the chamber. Princess! Danny cried out, rushing to her side. Shayla's eyes were wide, unfocused, staring at something none of them could see. He knows, she whispered, her voice trembling. In his nay, Zus, Master Org, he has felt the shift in the world's balance. He has felt him. Her terrified gaze locked onto Naruto. He is afraid, and his fear has given birth to a new evil. Not an Org born of pollution or destruction, but an Org born of twisted, bitter envy. It is coming, and it is coming for you. Naruto's serene expression vanished, replaced by a focused intensity that made the air itself grow cold. His Rinnegan seemed to darken, the concentric circles pulsing with a dangerous, violet light. He turned his head, his gaze piercing through the stone of the temple, through the miles of sky. Looking down at the human world far below. For the first time since his arrival, he extended his senses beyond the confines of the floating island. He let his sage consciousness spread, tasting the energy of this new earth. He felt the billions of human lives, the hum of their cities, the quiet pulse of their farmlands. And then he felt it. A vast, malevolent consciousness, buried deep within the earth. It was a power that seethed with ancient hatred, a will so foul and corrupt it made the blight in the forest feel like a child's tantrum. It was a power that dwarfed the Duke Orgs, a power that could, perhaps, even look a tailed beast in the eye. And it was aware of him. He felt its attention settle on him like a physical weight, a promise of annihilation. The game had just changed. His accidental arrival had not gone unnoticed. He was no longer just a protector of this new world. He was now the primary target of its greatest evil. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Poison of Envy in the Eye of the Storm. The immediate aftermath of Shayla's pronouncement was a vacuum of sound, a shared, held breath in the heart of the temple. The gentle splash of the waterfalls seemed to recede, the air growing heavy and thin. Shayla, supported by Danny's steadying arm, was trembling, the psychic backlash from Master Org's focus having scoured her mind. Her eyes, usually so full of ancient calm, air wide with a terror that was deeply unsettling to the rangers who saw her as their unshakable anchor. Cole was the first to break the silence, his protective instincts overriding his earlier suspicion. He moved to Shayla's other side, his voice losing its aggressive edge, replaced by a low, urgent concern. Princess, what did you see? What did he do? It wasn't a vision, Shayla breathed, her voice ragged. It was a touch. A mind brushing against mine. He has dwelled in his foul nexus for so long, a festering wound of hatred. He was content to poison the world slowly, to watch it choke on its own filth. But Naruto's arrival, it was like a star being born in his dark, stagnant sky. It is a power he does not understand, a power of pure life that is antithetical to his very being. And it has terrified him into action. Naruto's gaze remained fixed on a distant point beyond the temple walls, his Rinnegan perceiving the world in a way the others could only guess at. He felt the malevolent consciousness of Master Org. A vast, subterranean cancer, but it was distant, watching. The more immediate threat was the one Shayla had spoken of, the new creation. It was a spike of raw, negative energy. A needle point of pure malice that had just flared into existence in the sprawling human city of Turtle Cove, far below the Animarium's cloudy veil. It was a focused, deliberate act of aggression. A poisoned dart aimed directly at him. "She's right," Naruto said, his voice a low, somber murmur that cut through the team's worried chatter. The casual calm was gone, replaced by the focused gravity of a seasoned commander on the eve of battle. "There's a new one. It's different from the others. The Duke orgs I fought felt primal, like forces of nature twisted into a malevolent shape. This one feels personal. It's saturated with a single, overriding emotion." He finally turned to face them, his violet eyes seeming to draw in the light, their depths swirling with a quiet storm. Envy. It despises what it cannot have. It hates what it cannot be. It wants to tear down and defile anything that possesses a beauty or power it lacks. Taylor, ever the pragmatist, was already processing the tactical data. "A new org, specifically created to target you," she surmised, her eyes narrowing. "That's a declaration of war. He's testing you, trying to gauge your strength." She looked at her teammates. The soldier in her taking command. "We need to get down there. Now. The Animarium is our priority," Cole countered instantly, his lion-like territorialism flaring. This thing was born because of him. He jerked his head towards Naruto, the suspicion returning, and its focus is him. "The fight should be here, away from civilians." "No," Naruto stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "It won't work. The org isn't just a monster, it's a message. It will go to the place with the most life, the most potential for growth and creation, and it will try to poison it. Not for any strategic reason, but out of pure spite. It will attack the heart of your city. It wants to make me watch it die." He looked at Cole, his gaze not challenging, but educating. "And if you try to fight it here, it will simply retreat and wait, forcing you to remain on the defensive forever. We must meet it on the ground it has chosen. On our terms." There was a chilling certainty in his voice, the logic of a strategist who had fought 100 battles against enemies who weaponized emotion. Cole gritted his teeth, his instincts screaming to protect his home turf, but he couldn't find a flaw in Naruto's reasoning. "He's right, Cole," Alyssa said softly, her analytical mind having reached the same conclusion. "A psychological attack requires an assertive response. We have to engage." "Then what are we waiting for?" Max exclaimed, slapping his fists together. "Let's go show this new creep what happens when you mess with our planet." Shayla straightened, pushing away from Danny and Cole, her composure returning. Though her face remained pale, "The Animarium can provide transport." She raised her golden staff, and the central pool began to glow with a soft, turquoise light. A swirling vortex of water and energy formed in the center. "This will take you to the city. Naruto, be careful. This creature was made with your soul in mind. It will seek to turn your greatest strengths into your most profound weaknesses." Naruto gave her a brief, reassuring nod. "Thank you." He turned to the Rangers. "Let's go." Without another word, he walked towards the vortex. The Rangers exchanged a final, determined look and followed him. Cole gave him a wide berth, his distrust still palpable. Taylor, however, fell into step beside him as they approached the shimmering portal. "You've done this before, haven't you?" she asked, her voice low. "Fought things born of pure emotion." "The greatest evils in my world were not monsters of flesh and bone," Naruto replied, his eyes on the swirling vortex. "They were monsters of loneliness, of hatred, of a desperate, misguided love. I understand this enemy's heart better than it knows itself." His words settled over her, profound and deeply sad. She was a pilot, a soldier. She understood tactics, ballistics, and the physics of flight. She fought monsters that could be punched, shot, and blown up. He spoke of fighting ideologies, of warring with sorrow itself. For the first time, she began to grasp the sheer, crushing scale of the world he had left behind. They stepped through the portal. The sensation was like being dissolved into cool mist and then instantly reformed. They emerged not in a splash of water, but in a quiet, secluded park on the outskirts of Turtle Cove. The transition was seamless, leaving them standing on soft green grass under the shade of an oak tree. The air here was different, tinged with the faint, familiar smell of car exhaust and city life. It was the world they were sworn to protect. Okay, where is it? Cole demanded, his hand already on his growl phone, ready to morph. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment, his sage senses spreading out like a psychic shockwave, sweeping through the concrete and steel canyons of the city. He sifted through the millions of life signs, the chaotic symphony of a thriving metropolis, searching for the single, discordant note of the org. He found it in seconds. Downtown, he said, his eyes snapping open. Financial district. It's near a large, glass tower that hums with a great deal of electricity. The KBI Tower, Taylor identified immediately. Tallest building in the city. Public plaza out front. There will be hundreds of civilians. Then we need to move fast, Cole growled. Wild force, access. In a flash of brilliant, colored light, the 5 rangers morphed into their combat forms. Naruto watched the transformation with a detached curiosity. It was a fascinating application of energy, wrapping the users in a protective field and enhancing their physical abilities. It was efficient, if a little flashy. What about you? The Red Ranger asked, his voice now metallic and amplified. You have a suit. Naruto just smiled faintly. I am my suit. He blurred. He didn't run. He simply ceased to be where he was and reappeared 100 yards away, standing on the branch of a tree, his long coat not even fluttering from the movement. He beckoned for them to follow. Show off. Max muttered under his breath, but there was a note of awe in his voice. The Rangers were fast, their morphed forms allowing them to leap and bound across rooftops with superhuman agility. But they were still forced to follow Naruto. He moved with an effortless, liquid grace, flowing over the urban landscape as if it were an extension of his own will. He wasn't just moving fast. He was moving with an impossible efficiency, his path a perfect, unbroken line towards their destination. To Taylor, it looked like the flight path of a guided missile, and she felt a surge of professional admiration. He wasn't just powerful, he was precise. They arrived at the KBI Tower to a scene of escalating chaos. The plaza, moments before a bustling hub of lunch-hour activity, was now a maelstrom of screaming, fleeing civilians. In the center of it all stood the new org. It was hideously elegant. Unlike the crude, stitched-together forms of the other orgs, this one was sleek and disturbingly humanoid. Its body was crafted from a substance that looked like cracked, tarnished silver, as if it were an ancient, beautiful statue that had been deliberately shattered and then poorly glued back together. Through the cracks, a sickly, envious green light pulsed with a slow, resentful rhythm. It had long, razor-thin limbs that ended in needle-sharp claws, and its face was a smooth, featureless mirror. It had no eyes, no mouth, yet it radiated an aura of pure, focused loathing. This was Viridian, the org of envy. It wasn't attacking the people. It was attacking their creations. With a flick of its slender wrist, it sent a wave of green energy towards a row of meticulously maintained ornamental trees. The vibrant green leaves instantly turned black, crumbling to ash, the wood petrifying and cracking into dust. It pointed a finger at a stunning bronze statue of a soaring eagle in the center of the plaza. The bronze corroded in seconds, turning a verdigris green before dissolving into a pile of foul-smelling powder. It was a racing beauty, unmaking art, destroying anything that human hands had built with pride and care. That's him, Naruto said, his voice flat and cold as H.E. and the Rangers landed on the rooftop overlooking the plaza. It's feeding on the despair of the people watching their work, their city, be undone. Let's take it down, hard and fast. Cole roared, leaping from the roof, his lion fangs gleaming on his fists. Savage slash. He landed in front of Viridian and launched a ferocious series of punches and kicks, his movements a blur of red. The org didn't even try to dodge. It simply raised a silver arm. Cole's powerful blows landed not on its body, but on a shimmering green barrier that appeared a few inches from its skin. The barrier absorbed the kinetic energy of the attacks completely, without so much as a ripple. What? Cole grunted in disbelief, his most powerful melee attack utterly negated. Viridian's featureless, mirrored face tilted. It didn't speak with a voice. But its thoughts, venomous and clear, echoed directly in their minds. Less than strength, a tool of brutes. So crude, so uninspired. Allow me to show you what true power looks like. Greater than. It tapped Cole's chest with the tip of one long finger. A pulse of green energy shot through the Red Ranger's suit. He cried out, not in pain, but in confusion, as he felt his own strength drain away. His muscles suddenly felt like lead, his suit heavy as armor plating. He staggered back, breathing heavily, the energy for his attack completely gone. What did it do to me? He gasped, feeling utterly spent. It's an energy parasite, Naruto observed from the rooftop, his Rinnegan dissecting the org's ability. It doesn't block the attack, it consumes the intent behind it. The more aggressive you are, the more power you feed it. The other rangers joined the fray. Max zipped around Viridian with his shark fins, trying to find an opening. Alyssa and Danny tried a combined attack, the bison axe and tiger baton, aiming to pin it, but each attack was met with the same result. The green barrier would flare, the attack would be nullified, and the ranger who launched it would be left feeling drained and exhausted. Taylor took a different approach. Soaring into the air with her eagle wings, she drew her eagle sword and dove, not in a direct assault, but in a series of high-speed fly-by slashes, hoping to get past its defenses with speed. But the barrier was instantaneous, a perfect 360-degree shield that anticipated her every move. Less than such passion, such conviction, greater than the org's voice echoed in their heads. Dripping with mocking condescension, less than all wasted, I will drink it all, and leave you as empty shells. Greater than. The rangers regrouped, panting, their energy reserves dangerously low. They had barely touched the creature, and they were already nearing their limits. This isn't working, Max shouted in frustration. It's like punching a sponge. There has to be a weakness, Alyssa insisted, her mind racing through strategic possibilities. Naruto landed silently behind them, his feet making no sound on the pavement. There is. Its shield is powered by the energy it consumes. It's a purely defensive, reactive ability. It can't generate power on its own, it can only steal it. So how do we fight something we can't attack? Danny asked, the simple, direct question cutting to the heart of the problem. You don't, Naruto replied. He walked past them, his orange and black coat swirling around him. He came to a stop about 30 feet from the org. He didn't assume a fighting stance. He didn't flare his chakra. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, a picture of absolute, infuriating calm. Viridian's mirrored face swiveled to focus entirely on him. It could feel the immense, oceanic reservoir of power within Naruto, a feast beyond its wildest dreams. It was the reason it had been created. Less than you, greater than its mental voice hissed, losing its condescending tone for the first time, replaced by a raw, naked hunger. Less than the anomaly, the font of life. Give me your power. Greater than. It sent a bolt of pure, corrosive envy at Naruto, a wave of energy designed to sap his will and drain his spirit. Naruto didn't erect a barrier. He didn't dodge. He simply let the wave wash over him. It hit him and dissipated. It was like throwing a cup of water into the sun. His life force, his connection to the natural world, was so vast and so fundamentally positive that the negative energy of the attack was simply neutralized, erased on contact. My power is not something you can take, Naruto said, his voice calm and clear. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. My power is something I have earned. Through pain, through loss, through the bonds I have forged with others. Less than bonds, attachments. They are weaknesses, chains that hold you down. I will sever them. I will take everything from you. Greater than Viridian shrieked, its sleek silver body trembling with rage. It fired another, stronger blast. Again, it did nothing. Naruto took another step. You are an echo of a lonely, bitter being. You think power is something to be hoarded, something to be stolen. You are wrong. Power is something you share, something you use to protect. He was closing the distance now, walking with that same unhurried, implacable pace he had used in the blighted forest. He wasn't attacking. He was simply approaching. The rangers watched, utterly baffled. He was walking into arm's reach of a monster that had effortlessly disabled all of them, and he was doing it with the nonchalance of someone going for a stroll in the park. Viridian, unable to steal energy from a non-existent attack, and its own direct assaults proving useless, was forced into a position it was not designed for. It had to initiate physical contact. It lunged forward, its razor-sharp claws aimed at Naruto's heart. The attack was blindingly fast. But to Naruto's Rinnegan, it was moving through molasses. He didn't counter. He didn't block. He simply swayed his body a few inches to the left. The claws missed him by a millimeter. As the orc's arm shot past him, he reached out, not with a fist, but with a gentle, open hand, and placed it on the creature's shoulder. The moment he made contact, he flooded the orc's body with a torrent of pure, untainted sage energy. It was not an attack. It was a gift. A horrible, agonizing, unwanted gift. Viridian screamed, a true, vocal shriek of pure agony this time. The energy Naruto poured into it was life, creation, harmony. To a being made of pure envy and negation, it was the most excruciating poison imaginable. The green light pulsing in its cracks flared violently, trying to fight back, to corrupt the energy, but it was like a single drop of ink trying to stain an entire ocean. The silver body began to glow, not with its sick green light, but with a brilliant, warm gold. The cracks in its form widened, not from damage, but as if they were being forced open by the sheer pressure of the life force being pumped into them. "You wanted my power," Naruto said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, his violet eyes glowing with a fearsome, divine light. "Here, have it all." With a final, deafening roar of light and sound, Viridian the envious orc detonated. It was not a dirty, destructive explosion, but a clean, bright nova of golden energy that expanded outwards, washing over the plaza. The corrupted statue remnants dissolved. The dead trees bloomed with impossible, instantaneous life, bursting with green leaves and white flowers. The entire plaza, moments before a scene of destruction, was now more beautiful. More vibrant than it had been before the attack. The rangers stared, their minds unable to process what they had just seen. He hadn't beaten the monster. He had fed it so much life that its hateful, empty shell had burst from the sheer grace of it. He had defeated envy with generosity. He had weaponized kindness. Naruto stood in the center of the newly blooming plaza, the golden light fading around him. He lowered his hand and turned to face them. His expression was not triumphant. It was weary, and deeply sad. "Master Org is watching," he said simply. "This was just the first move. The next will be worse." Taylor looked at him, standing there amidst the impossible beauty he had just created from the ashes of hatred. Her admiration for his precision, his power, was now eclipsed by a profound, humbling awe for his spirit. Cole said he could be a different kind of monster. He was right. He was a monster of hope, and his very presence was a weep. On that their true enemy was just beginning to comprehend. And in that moment, she understood with a terrifying certainty that the fate of their world no longer rested solely on their shoulders. It rested on his. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Echoes in the Nexus, Seeds in the Garden. The place was an offense to the very concept of existence. It was a cavernous, non-Euclidean space carved from the heart of a dead world. A reality defined by absence. Walls of weeping, obsidian-like stone pulsed with a faint, diseased light, and the floor was a mire of industrial sludge and organic decay that bubbled with methane and despair. This was the Org Nexus, the throne room of the world's most profound sickness. At its center, upon a throne of tangled, rusted pipes and bleached bones, sat the master. His form was indistinct, a shroud of shadow and rage from which two malevolent, crimson points of light burned like embers in a charnel pit. The air around him was so saturated with hatred that it was physically cold. Before the throne stood the shattered remnants of his high command. Duke Org's Jindrax, a master of blades with a flair for the dramatic, and Toxica, a mistress of dark magic whose sorcery was as sharp as her wit, were kneeling. They were usually a bickering, almost comical pair, their arrogance a buffer against the horrors they served. Today, they were silent, their bodies trembling not from fear of their master, but from the residual, psychic shockwave that had emanated from the city above. When Viridian had died, its explosive purification had sent a ripple of pure, unadulterate life force through the planet's energy field. To the orgs in their nexus, it had felt like the sun exploding in their faces. "It is gone, Master," Toxica reported, her voice, usually a high-pitched, mocking sneer, now a strained, fearful whisper. "Utterly erased, not just destroyed, purified." Jindrax, ever the proud duelist, forced himself to his feet, his hands clenched around the hilts of his swords. "Impossible." Viridian was born of your purest envy, Master. Its power was absolute. No ranger, no Zord, could have withstood it. What was this thing? The twin red lights of Master Org's eyes narrowed. His voice, when it came, was not a sound but a pressure, a grinding of tombstones and the rustle of dead leaves that echoed directly in their skulls. Less than it was an answer. Greater than the voice was heavy with a dawning, cosmic dread. Less than for millennia, I have posed a question to this world. I have asked it, what is the purpose of life, if not to decay and die? I have offered it the sweet certainty of the grave, the comfort of the inevitable end. The Rangers, with their foolish courage, their fleeting Zords, they were merely a protest. A child's tantrum against the coming of night. Greater than. The shadows around the throne deepened, and the temperature in the Nexus plummeted. Less than this anomaly, it is not a protest. It is an answer. It answered my question by showing me a truth I had long forgotten. That life does not merely exist to die. It exists to grow. It can be a force of creation so potent that it can unmake my creations not with violence, but with grace. Greater than. Master Org leaned forward, his form taking on a slightly more defined, terrifying shape. The raw, unfiltered terror emanating from him was a force of nature in itself. He had been the ultimate predator, the inevitable entropy. And he had just discovered that a force more fundamental than his own now walked the world. Less than Viridian failed because it tried to steal power. A fool's errand. Greater than his mental voice was a low, seething hiss, the sound of acid dissolving steel. Less than you cannot steal from an ocean by taking a single cup. We will not try to drain it. We will poison it. We will find a power that does not consume life, but invalidates it. A blight that withers the soul. A silence that answers creation's song. Find me a source of absolute decay. A rot that cannot be healed. Find me the antithesis of a god, and I will give it a body of hatred to wear. Now go. Greater than. The command was a physical blast of force that sent Jindrax and Toxica scrambling from the chamber, their own fear a far more potent motivator than any threat of punishment. They fled, leaving their master alone in the groaning, diseased heart of his domain. The two red lights stared into the oppressive darkness, no longer burning with the arrogance of a supreme being, but with the frantic, terrified cunning of a cornered animal. The game had changed from a slow, methodical conquest to a desperate battle for survival, and he knew it. The return to the Animarium was heavy with the silence of a battle's aftermath. The Rangers and Naruto materialized in the main temple, the turquoise light of the portal fading behind them. They were physically unharmed, air suits having protected them from the final, purifying blast, but the psychic toll of the encounter was etched on their faces as they demorphed. They had just witnessed a victory more absolute than any they had ever achieved. Yet there was no sense of triumph. It had been a victory on a scale they couldn't fully comprehend, like ants watching a human effortlessly erase a chalk drawing they had spent all day fighting. Cole rounded on Naruto, his face a mask of frustration and barely contained anger. His pride, the core of his identity as the Red Ranger and team leader, had been deeply wounded. What was that? You could have done that from the beginning. Why did you wait? Why did you let it tear up the plaza, terrorize all those people? Because it wasn't about the plaza, Naruto replied. His voice calm but edged with the weariness of a teacher explaining a difficult concept to a stubborn student. And it wasn't about the people. It was about Master Org. He was watching through that creature's senses. He needed to see. See what? Cole demanded, taking a step closer. You showing off how powerful you are. No, Naruto said, his violet eyes meeting Cole's fiery gaze without a trace of intimidation. He needed to see that his philosophy is flawed. He needed to see his power, the power of envy and negation, completely and utterly fail. I didn't just destroy his monster, Cole. I sent him a message. One that will force him to reconsider his entire strategy. He will be more dangerous now, but he will also be predictable. Fear makes you predictable. That's a hell of a gamble. Eat a take with civilian lives on the line. There was no gamble, Naruto stated with absolute certainty. I was monitoring every person in that plaza. If any of them had been in true danger, I would have ended it instantly. What you saw as waiting was me gathering intelligence and setting the stage for a psychological, rather than a physical, victory. Cole was left speechless, his argument, born. Of a warrior's straightforward desire to smash the bad guy, falling apart against Naruto's cold, strategic logic. He had been playing checkers. Naruto was playing a game on a level he couldn't even see. He's right, Cole, Taylor interjected, her voice cutting through the tension. She had been watching Naruto, not with suspicion, but with a pilot's appreciation for calculated risk. It was a strategic feint. He drew the enemy in and defeated it on his own terms. Cole shot her a betrayed look before stalking off without another word, his fists clenched at his sides. He disappeared into one of the temple's corridors. A storm of conflicted emotions. Danny and Max exchanged a worried look but knew better than to follow him when he was in this state. Shayla stepped forward, her expression serene but her eyes troubled. The balance of this conflict has been irrevocably altered. You should all rest and process what has transpired. Your spirits are weary. The Rangers nodded and began to disperse, leaving Naruto alone in the main chamber. He walked to one of the open archways, looking out at the endless sea of clouds below. He had won the day, but the victory felt hollow. He had unmasked himself to his new enemy, and in doing so, had painted a target on this peaceful, floating world. The weight of it settled on his shoulders, a familiar, heavy cloak. Hours later, the sun began to dip below the cloud line, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange, violet, and gold. Naruto found Taylor in a place that was both a hangar and a sanctuary. It was a vast, cavernous space carved into the side of the Animarium. Open to the sky, here, the 5 wild Zords rested. They were not parked like machines but slumbered like living animals, their immense, metallic bodies rising and falling with a slow, rhythmic light that mimicked breathing. The air hummed with a unique blend of raw, natural energy and sophisticated, unknowable technology. Taylor was perched on the wing of her Golden Eagle Zord, a high-tech tablet in her hand. Its light illuminating the focused, serious lines of her face. She wasn't running diagnostics. She was staring at a photograph on the screen, a picture of herself, years younger. In a crisp Air Force dress uniform, standing beside 2 smiling young men in similar attire. Naruto approached silently, his footsteps absorbed by the strange, moss-like floor. "They were your wingmen," he said. It wasn't a question. Taylor jumped, startled, and quickly blanked the screen. Her military discipline snapped back into place like a shield. "That's classified." "Grief isn't classified," Naruto replied gently, stopping a respectful distance away. He looked up at the immense, golden head of the Eagle Zord. "It's a beautiful creature. It feels proud and lonely. It misses flying with the others." Taylor's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. She followed his gaze, her own eyes softening as she looked at her Zord. "It's not a creature. It's a machine." The words were automatic, a programmed response, but they lacked conviction. "You don't believe that," Naruto said. He reached out and placed a hand on the warm metal of the wing. He closed his eyes. "I can feel its spirit. The spirit of the sky, of freedom, of a hunter's perfect, unwavering focus. And I can feel its connection to you. It chose you because your soul is the same. You fly to be free. But you carry the weight of those who fell beside you." A single, traitorous tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her cheek. She angrily wiped it away. "You don't know anything about me. Now what it's like to be the last one standing," he said, his voice imbued with a sorrow so ancient it seemed impossible for someone his age. "I know what it's like to carry the dreams of the dead. It's a heavy burden, but it's what makes us strong enough to protect the living." He looked at her, his Rinnegan soft and full of an empathy that bypassed all her defenses. "You don't have to carry it alone." He then turned his attention to the Zord, his hand glowing with a soft, green light. "There's a slight energy fluctuation in the primary gyroscopic stabilizer. It's a cascade failure waiting to happen. Your scanners wouldn't have caught it. It's a misalignment on a spiritual level, not a mechanical one. The machine is reflecting a conflict in its pilot." He tapped a specific point on the wing. "If you recalibrate the energy conduit right here, it will not only fix the machine, but it might help clear your head." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone with her Zord. Taylor stared at the spot he had indicated, then back at his retreating form. Her tablet could measure engine torque and power levels. He could read a machine's soul. She lowered her head, the tough, unflappable facade of the soldier finally crumbling. and allowed herself a moment of quiet, cathartic grief, feeling, for the first time in years, that someone else in the universe truly understood. Naruto's path led him to a part of the temple he hadn't yet seen, a library. It was a circular chamber whose walls were lined with shelves carved from the living wood of a single, colossal tree. Instead of books, the shelves held thousands of glowing, crystalline scrolls that pulsed with a soft, inner light. The air smelled of old wood, ozone, and preserved knowledge. Alyssa was there, a datapad in her hand, Tr. Ying to cross-reference the energy signature from Viridian's final moments with the ancient texts. She looked up as Naruto entered, her intelligent eyes bright with a curiosity that was almost a physical force. "I was hoping I'd find you," she said, her voice betraying her excitement. "I've been analyzing the data from your fight. The way you defeated that org, it defies every known law of physics. You introduced a massive amount of positive energy into a closed negative system, causing it to overload. But where did that energy come from? It wasn't channeled from the environment, and it far exceeded the potential output of your own biomass. It's a thermodynamic impossibility." Naruto smiled, picking up one of the crystal scrolls. It felt warm to the touch. "You're trying to measure the soul with a ruler, Alyssa. You're looking for the source of the water, but ignoring the ocean it's a part of." "The soul isn't a quantifiable source of energy," she countered, though her tone was inquisitive, not dismissive. "Isn't it?" he asked. He held his hand out, palm up. A perfect, miniature, swirling vortex of wind and chakra, a tiny Rinnegan, formed above his palm, humming with contained power. "This is my energy, my chakra, but it is shaped by my will, my memories, my belief in my master, who taught me this technique, my promise to my friends. It is a physical manifestation of my spirit. The energy didn't just come from me. It came from everyone I've ever known, everyone I've ever fought to protect. That is a source of power your science doesn't have a name for yet." Alyssa stared at the perfect sphere of energy, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she was seeing with what she knew to be possible. He was speaking of emotion and spirit as quantifiable, tangible forces. It was the fusion of metaphysics and physics, a concept so far beyond her understanding that it was utterly captivating. "Could you teach me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Not the technique, the theory, the principles behind it." "I can try," Naruto said, his smile widening. He dissipated the Rinnegan and turned his attention to her datapad. "Let's start with what you call thermodynamics. I have a feeling my world had a different way of looking at it." He sat down with her, and for the next hour, they talked. He spoke of chakra coils and the gates of the soul, of yin and yang release, of the spiritual connection between all living things. And Alyssa listened, her brilliant mind absorbing it all, translating his mystical world into a new science, a new understanding of the universe. She was drawn not to his power, but to the infinite, ordered complexity of the knowledge behind it. He was a living library of impossible truths, and she wanted to read every single page. As twilight deepened into a velvety, star-dusted night, Shayla found Naruto in her most private sanctuary, a small, hidden garden behind the temple, open to the sky. Here, the rarest and most ancient plants on the Animarium grew, some of which glowed with their own soft, bioluminescent light. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming moon lotus. He was kneeling on the soft, mossy ground, his hand resting on the stem of a withered-looking silverbell sapling. A gentle, golden aura flowed from his palm into the plant. As Shayla watched, the sapling's drooping leaves began to perk up, its stem straightening, a faint, healthy sheen returning to its silver bark. "This one feels very old," Naruto said without turning around. "Its spirit is tired. It is the last of its kind," Shayla said, her voice soft as the petals of the flowers around them. She came to kneel beside him. "It has been fading for 100 years. I have sung to it, nourished it with the purest water from the heart of the island, but I could not halt its slow march into memory. It's not enough to be cared for," Naruto murmured, his eyes closed in concentration. "Everything needs a purpose, a reason to keep growing." He infused the sapling not just with life force, but with a feeling, a concept, of resilience, of hope, of the promise of a new dawn. Under his touch, a single new bud, pearlescent and perfect, began to form on one of its branches. Shayla watched, her heart aching with a feeling she couldn't name. For 5,000 years, she had been the solitary guardian of this island, the mother to all its life. She had been utterly, profoundly alone. She had power, but it was the passive, enduring power of a mountain. He had the active, vibrant power of a river, carving new paths, bringing life wherever he flowed. "You carry the scent of many worlds on your soul," she whispered, her gaze distant. "So much conflict, so much pain. I do not know how one person can bear such a weight." "I wasn't always alone," he said, finally opening his eyes to look at her. In the soft glow of the garden, his rippled eyes seemed to hold the depth of the night sky. "And I learned that the weight is lighter when you're carrying it for someone else." He reached out, not to her, but to the air beside her. He gathered the ambient natural energy, weaving it with a thread of his own chakra. A single, perfect flower bloomed from nothingness in his hand. It was a type of lotus, but its petals were made of a soft, solidified light, glowing with a warm, golden radiance that would never fade. He offered it to her. "For your garden," he said simply. Shayla accepted it, her fingers brushing his. The warmth of the flower, and of his touch, was a shocking, beautiful sensation. She looked at this boy, this god, this lonely, kind-hearted traveler who had fallen from the sky, and saw not a weapon or a prophecy, but a kindred spirit. A fellow guardian. In that quiet, shared moment, surrounded by the gentle light of a garden at the edge of the world, a bond far deeper than that of allies was forged. It was the silent, profound understanding of two souls who knew the price of protecting a world. Miles away, in the city of Turtle Cove, Cole Evans was not resting. In a darkened, private training facility, he moved like a caged animal, his body a blur of motion. He struck a reinforced concrete pillar again and again, his knuckles raw, his breathing ragged, the memory of Viridian effortlessly draining his strength, of Naruto's calm, terrifying power, played over and over in his mind. He was the Red Ranger, the leader, the lion. He was supposed to be the strongest. But he had been rendered irrelevant, a bystander in his own battle. He let out a furious roar and struck the pillar with a final, desperate blow. The concrete cracked, but the feeling of powerlessness remained. He stared at his bruised hand, his chest heaving. Naruto Uzumaki wasn't an ally in his eyes. He was a living embodiment of Cole's own limits. He was a mountain Cole now felt he had to surpass, or be left forever in its shadow. The battle for the planet had a new front, and it had just opened within the heart of the leader of the Wild Force Rangers. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Sound of Silence. In the deepest, most lightless trench of the Pacific, where the pressure could crush a Zord to the size of a fist and the cold was absolute, Jindrax and Toxica found their prize. They had been led there by Master Org's rage, following a psychic trail not of pollution, but of its opposite, a place so devoid of life, so utterly forgotten by the sun, that the very water had given up. Here, on a field of ancient, super-compressed silt, lay the skeletal remains of leviathans that had died before the first humans had learned to make fire. For eons, nothing had grown here. Nothing had decayed. There was only a perfect, timeless stasis. It was a place of profound and eternal apathy. Toxica raised her wand, its tip sputtering in the crushing abyss, and drew forth a sample of the silt. It wasn't just mud. It was a physical substance that had absorbed the metaphysical concept of nothing. It did not radiate cold, it radiated an absence of heat. It did not radiate darkness, it radiated a complete rejection of light. "This is it," she breathed, her voice a mixture of triumph and primal unease. "The perfect ingredient, the antithesis." Jindrax shuddered, his usual bravado failing him. "It feels empty. Let's get out of here. This place gives me the creeps." Back in the foul warmth of the Nexus, they presented the sample to their master. Master Org extended a shadowy tendril and touched the silt. There was no grand explosion of power. Instead, the area around his touch simply ceased. The bubbling sludge stopped bubbling. The groaning of the pipes fell silent. A perfect sphere of absolute nullification spread for a few feet before receding. A low, guttural sound that might have been a chuckle of approval echoed in their minds. Asterisk less than yes. Beautiful. It does not fight. It does not hate. It simply ends the conversation. Greater than he drew the essence of the nothing into himself, molding it with a sliver of his own ancient malice. He gave it a form not of rage or envy, but of serene, elegant finality. He gave it a name. Less than go, Lord Silencio. Do not make them scream. Make them listen to the void. Greater than. Naruto felt it as a sudden, jar-ing silence in the symphony of the world. He was in Shayla's private garden, watching her tend to the silverbell sapling he had revived. The bud he had coaxed into existence was now a small, perfect, pearlescent flower. And its faint light seemed to give the ancient plant a new sense of purpose. He had been teaching Shayla how to feel the flow of energy within the plants, to sense their needs not as a caretaker, but as a part of their own life cycle. Their hands were inches apart, both focused on the sapling, and the natural energy of the garden flowed between them, a circuit of shared, peaceful intent. Then the silence came. It was not a sound, but a cessation of feeling. On the far western edge of the Animarium, a patch of the island's vibrant life force just went quiet. It didn't feel corrupted or consumed. Like the org blight, it felt like a song that had abruptly stopped mid-note. Shayla gasped, her hand flying to her chest. What was that? I can't feel the whispering orchids anymore. Or the sun chaser ferns. It's like they've just vanished. Naruto was already on his feet, his Rinnegan active, his perception spreading like a wave across the island. He found the dead zone. It was a circle about 100 meters in diameter. The plants and trees within it were still standing, physically intact. But their life force, the golden aura he could so clearly see everywhere else, was gone. They were just objects now, empty husks. The very air in that zone felt thin, sterile. It's a nullification field, he said, his voice low and serious. It's not killing them. It's erasing their reason to live. He knew, with a cold certainty that settled in the pit of his stomach, that this was the enemy's next move. Not an attack on the body, but on the soul. He immediately sent a pulse of his own chakra to the ranger's communicators, a unique frequency Alyssa had helped him calibrate. Less than trouble, western cliffs, a new type of blight. Greater than. He and Shayla arrived at the edge of silent zone just as the morphed rangers did. They had taken one of the Animarium's aerial transport routes and now stood, weapons ready, at the border between vibrant life and absolute stillness. Whoa, Max said, his usual chipper tone gone. It's like someone just hit the mute button on the forest. Cole stepped forward, his lion fangs gleaming, and took one step into the silent zone. The effect was immediate. The brilliant red of his suit seemed to dim, the ambient hum of his morpher dying away. My energy, he grunted, taking a step back into the living part of the forest. It feels like it's being smothered. The field appears to absorb all forms of radiated energy, Alyssa observed, her helmet's visor already running scans. Kinetic, thermal, bioelectric, it's all being drawn into a central point and neutralized. It's a perfect energy sink. Before anyone could formulate a plan, the source of the field revealed itself. From the center of the silent circle, a figure rose from the ground. It was tall and slender, clad in robes of a gray so profound it seemed to absorb the light, leaving a human-shaped hole in the world. Its head was covered by a deep hood, and it wore a simple, elegant mask of white porcelain, devoid of any features save for two empty, sorrowful eyeholes. This was Lord Silencio. It held no weapon. It simply stood, its presence a vortex of utter calm and finality. Less than the struggle is so tiresome, greater than its voice echoed in their minds, a calm, passionless whisper. Less than the noise of life is so chaotic. Why do you cling to it? There is a great and peaceful quiet waiting for you all. Why not accept it? Greater than. I like a little chaos. Max yelled, charging forward. Shark attack. He leapt into the air, his shark fins ready for a spinning strike. But as he entered the nullification field, his momentum died, his lightning-fast spin slowed to a clumsy stumble, and he fell to the ground with a dull thud, his suit flickering. He struggled to get up, his movements sluggish and weak. Max, Danny roared, charging in to help his friend. But he too was caught in the oppressive aura. The immense strength of the bison seemed to leak out of him, and he found it was a monumental effort just to lift Max to his feet. Lord Silencio didn't even watch them struggle. Its hooded head turned, the empty eyes of its mask fixing on Naruto. Less than you, the source of the cacophony. Yo, Life sings so loudly it is a discordant scream. I am here to bring you peace. Greater than. Naruto stepped forward. He gathered chakra into his palm, the familiar, comforting swirl of the Rinnegan forming. He walked into the field. And the effect was immediate and deeply unsettling. The perfectly stable sphere of power in his hand began to waver, the chakra losing its cohesion, the sound of its rotation dying away. By the time he was 10 feet inside the zone, it had completely dissipated, leaving only a faint warmth in his palm. This was a direct counter to everything he was. His power was based on molding and projecting life energy. This creature's very existence unraveled it. Taylor, watching from the edge of the field, made a quick decision. It neutralizes energy-based attacks. We have to go physical. She drew her eagle sword. Cole, on my mark, a purely physical assault. No savage slash, just fists and steel. Right, Cole grunted, shaking off the last of the field's lethargy. Taylor took a deep breath and charged in. She didn't try to use any energy blasts or fancy techniques. She relied on pure, disciplined swordsmanship, her blade a blur of silver. Cole charged with her, his fists a barrage of raw, physical force. But it was like fighting a ghost. Lord Silencio didn't block or parry. It simply swayed, its movements minimal and impossibly fluid, causing every attack to miss by a mere fraction of an inch. And with every passing second inside the field, Taylor and Cole grew slower, their movements more labored. The field didn't just drain energy, it drained the will to fight, the very intent to cause harm. It's no good, Taylor gasped, staggering back, her arms feeling like lead weights. We can't even touch it. Less than violence is the loudest noise of all, greater than Silencio whispered in their minds. Asterisk less than it is the first thing I shall silence. Greater than. From the temple, Shayla watched through the waters of the scrying pool, her face pale. She could feel the dead zone on the Animarium as a cold, numb spot on her own soul. She focused her will, pouring all the energy she could muster, the purest essence of the island's life force, into a single, golden beam aimed at Naruto. She would be his anchor against the encroaching silence. Naruto felt her power flow into him, a warm, reassuring current. It didn't make his own powers return, but it cleared his mind, pushing back the creeping apathy that was beginning to cloud his thoughts. He looked at Silencio, not as a warrior, but as a puzzle. Brute force wouldn't work, energy projection wouldn't work, he had to change the very nature of the fight. Alyssa, he called out, his voice sounding strangely loud in the muted air. The field, is it uniform? Alyssa, who had been frantically running scans from the edge of the zone, looked up from her data. No, it's not. The nullification effect is stronger at lower frequencies. Higher frequency energies are less affected, but we don't have any weapons that operate on that high a band. Wait, her eyes widened behind her visor. Theoretically, what about natural energy? The energy of the world itself. What is its frequency? Naruto's eyes snapped open in understanding. Of course, his jutsu, his chakra, was his own energy. Molded and projected. But Sage Mode was different. It was about becoming one with the natural energy that was already there. He couldn't project a Rinnegan into the field. But what if he could convince the energy already inside the field to act on his behalf? It was a technique of unimaginable subtlety. It wasn't about shouting down the silence. It was about finding the one vibration that silence couldn't ignore. He dropped into a meditative stance, his feet planted firmly on the deadened ground. He closed his eyes. The Rangers watched, confused, as he simply stood there, doing nothing. Lord Silencio tilted its head, a gesture of mild curiosity. Naruto extended his senses. He did not push his chakra out. He pulled the world in. He ignored the struggling Rangers. The unnerving presence of the org, the cold, dead feeling of the ground. He listened. He listened past the silence, to the memory of the energy that had once been there. He felt the faint, ghostly echo of the whispering orchids. He felt the lingering warmth of the sun in the soil. He connected with the fundamental planetary vibration, the deep, slow hum of the world's own life, a frequency so low and so profound that the org's nullification field, designed to silence the noise of life, simply didn't register it as a threat. He found it, a single, resonant note in the heart of the silence. He gathered a minuscule amount of that natural energy, not in his hand, but at the tip of his index finger. He didn't mold it into a weapon of force, but into a thing of pure concept. He shaped it into a single, perfect, impossibly sharp needle of solidified sound. A Sanban. Less than your meditation is peaceful, greater than Lord Silencio's voice echoed, tinged with something like approval. Asterisk less than you are beginning to understand. Surrender to the quiet, greater than. There is no such thing as absolute quiet, Naruto said, his eyes snapping open. They were no longer just the Rinnegan. They were the cross-slitted, golden eyes of a perfect sage. Blazing with an inner light. There is only the space between the notes. He moved. His speed was not a blur of energy, but a quiet, instantaneous repositioning. One moment he was standing still. The next he was directly in front of Lord Silencio, his finger extended. He didn't thrust. He didn't strike. He simply touched the center of the org's chest with the tip of his finger. Where the conceptual needle of resonant energy was focused. He released it. It was not an explosion. It was an introduction. He introduced a single, perfect note of pure, harmonious life into the absolute vacuum of the org's being. For a being of pure nullification, the presence of a single, undeniable truth was a cataclysmic paradox. Lord Silencio could not negate something that was already a fundamental part of the universe. It couldn't silence the world's own heartbeat. The note did not destroy it, it defined it. And in defining it, it revealed its true nature, that it was an artificial void. An imposter in a reality that was fundamentally based on existence, not absence. Lord Silencio looked down at Naruto's finger, then at its own chest. A tiny, hairline crack of pure, golden light appeared where Naruto had touched it. The crack spread, not with a sound, but with the visual representation of a bell's perfect, resonant ring. The golden crack spider webbed across its gray robes, its porcelain mask. The nullification field collapsed in an instant. The sound of the forest rushed back in. The hum of the ranger's morphers returned. The vibrant colors of the world seemed to snap back into focus. Max and Danny felt their strength surge back into their limbs. Lord Silencio lifted a hand, looking at the golden light consuming its fingers. It turned its empty eyes to Naruto, and for the first time, its mental voice held an emotion. Not hatred, not fear, but a profound, soul-shaking surprise. Less than awe. So there is a song, after all, greater than. With that final thought, it dissolved into a million motes of golden dust that were gently reabsorbed into the forest floor. Where it had stood, a single, new green sprout pushed its way through the deadened earth. The rangers stared, dumbfounded. The battle had been won not with a bang, but with a whisper. Naruto stood, breathing heavily, the golden glow of his sage mode receding. That single, perfect act of control had taken more focus, more spiritual energy than 100 of his most destructive jutsu. He swayed on his feet, the world swimming in his vision. Before he could fall, a strong, steady arm wrapped around his waist, supporting him. He looked up into the sharp, concerned blue eyes of Taylor Earhardt. Her helmet was off, and her usual, guarded expression was replaced by one of raw, undisguised awe and concern. "Easy there, traveler," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "I've got you." He leaned against her, for a moment allowing himself to feel the bone-deep exhaustion. He had faced the silence and won. But he knew, with a chilling certainty, that Master Org was learning. He was adapting. He had attacked Naruto's strength, then his spirit. Each new threat would be more insidious, more intelligent, than the last. And Naruto couldn't afford to win every battle alone. He looked at Taylor, at Alyssa who was rushing over with a datapad full of impossible readings, at the rest of the weary but resolute team. He had to teach them. He had to make them stronger. Because the next time the silence came, he might not be able to find the right note to break it. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The shape of water, the weight of a leaf. The scar upon the Animarium was not a wound of flesh, but of spirit. In the days following the defeat of Lord Silencio, the western cliffs remained a place of profound unease. The grass was green, the trees stood tall. But the vibrant, energetic hum of life was gone, replaced by a hollow echo. The birds wouldn't sing there, the insects wouldn't swarm. It was a beautiful corpse. A physical reminder that their enemy was evolving beyond mere destruction. This chilling realization hung over the temple like a shroud, far more oppressive than the memory of any physical defeat. The Rangers trained, their movements fueled by a new, desperate intensity. Cole pushed himself to the point of collapse, his fists striking practiced golems of woven wood and stone until his knuckles bled. Danny and Max sparred with a ferocity that bordered on anger, their friendly rivalry replaced by grim determination. Taylor and Alyssa ran tactical simulations, their strategies growing more complex, their scenarios more dire. They were all getting stronger, faster, more efficient. And Naruto, watching them from the quiet shade of the temple's main archway, knew it wasn't nearly enough. Air sharpening a sword that their enemy was learning how to shatter without ever touching the blade. He waited until they were assembled in the main chamber, their bodies aching and their spirits frayed from a morning of grueling work. Shayla stood near the central pool, her presence a silent, worried bomb. "It's not working," Naruto said, his voice cutting through their weary silence. It wasn't an accusation, it was a simple, undeniable statement of fact. Cole, toweling sweat from his face, stiffened. "We're pushing our limits every day. We're stronger than we were last week." "Your bodies are stronger," Naruto corrected gently. "Your techniques are faster. But your power is the same. It is a loud, powerful river, and you are learning to direct its flow. But Master Org has just shown you. He can build a dam that will make your river a stagnant pond. He will do it again. The next time, the dam will be stronger. So what's your point?" Cole shot back, his frustration evident. "That we should just give up." "No," Naruto replied, his gaze sweeping over each of them. "That you need to stop thinking of your power as a river and start seeing it as the ocean it comes from. You are not just borrowing the Animarium's strength. You are the Animarium. Its spirit flows through you. But you are only opening the tap a little, letting out a trickle of what you're capable of." Alyssa, ever the analyst, picked up on his meaning. "You're talking about a fundamental shift in our energy control. Not just projecting it outwards, but mastering it internally." "Precisely," Naruto affirmed with a nod of approval. "Your morphers give you a suit of armor and a weapon. But the real power is the heart that beats inside that armor. I am going to teach you to control the energy at its source. I'm going to teach you how to feel the pulse of this island in your own veins." Max smirked, a flash of his old bravado returning. "Awesome. So, what's first? You gonna teach us that cool blue swirly ball thing?" "No," Naruto said, a faint smile touching his lips. "First, I'm going to teach you how to hold a leaf." The collective anticlimax was palpable. Max's smirk faltered. Danny looked confused. Even Taylor raised a skeptical eyebrow. Cole, however, looked downright insulted. "A leaf," he repeated, his voice flat and dangerous. "We're fighting for the fate of the planet, and you want to waste our time with arts and crafts." "The heaviest things in the universe, Cole," Naruto said, his voice losing its gentle, instructive tone and taking on a quiet, unshakable authority, "are not mountains or stars. They are the things we think are small. Come with me, all of you." He led them not to a training ground of hardened earth and practice dummies, but to a place they had never seen, a small, secluded grove nestled in a valley at the very heart of the island. This was the Grove of Beginnings. The trees here were impossibly ancient, their bark like wrinkled stone, their leaves 1,000 shades of silver and green. The air was still and thick, humming with a pure, concentrated natural energy that made the rest of the Animarium feel diluted. In the center of the grove was a small, perfectly still pond. Its surface as smooth and reflective as black glass. Naruto walked to one of the ancient trees and plucked a single, silver-green leaf from its branch. He turned to face them, holding the leaf flat on his open palm. "The goal is simple. Use the energy that connects you to this island, the same energy that powers your Zords and fuels your morphers, and make this leaf stick to your hand." He then turned his hand over. The leaf remained perfectly in place, clinging to his palm as if glued there. "Then, make it stick to the back of your hand." He flipped his hand again, and the leaf stayed put. "Then, to your forehead. Any part of your body. The goal is not just to make it stick, but to make it a part of you. You must feel the life force in the leaf and match it with your own. You must listen to it." He tossed the leaf to Alyssa. "No morphing. This is about you, not your suits." What followed was a masterclass in frustration. Alyssa, ever the scientist, tried to analyze the problem. She held the leaf, closed her eyes, and tried to focus, searching for an energy frequency to match. The leaf fluttered to the ground. Max, approaching it like a game, tried to will the leaf to stick with sheer, cocky confidence. It fell. Danny, with his gentle nature, was perhaps the most successful at first. He held the leaf and it trembled, clinging to his palm for a full 3 seconds before peeling off. Taylor was a study in military discipline. She stood ramrod straight, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. She was treating it like target practice, an exercise in precision. But she was trying to command the energy, to force it into a pinpoint of adhesion. The leaf refused to be commanded, and fell again and again. And then there was Cole. He radiated impatience. To him, this was a pointless, demeaning exercise. He grabbed a leaf and slammed it onto his palm, trying to brute force a connection with a surge of raw, unfocused energy. The leaf was instantly shredded, a puff of green dust floating away on the still air. He growled in frustration, grabbed another leaf, and focused harder. This time, the leaf burst into a tiny, bright flame and vanished into ash. Naruto watched him, his expression unreadable. You are shouting at it, Cole. You cannot hear a whisper if you are screaming. I'm the leader of this team. Cole snarled, turning on him, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. My connection to the Lion Zord, to the Animarium, is the strongest. This is a stupid trick. It is not a trick, Naruto said calmly. It is the foundation of everything I am. Your connection is strong, yes. It is a torrent, a wildfire. That is why you cannot hold a single leaf. You have the power of a volcano, but the control of a pebble in an avalanche. That was the final straw. Cole's pride, already battered and bruised, shattered completely. That's it. You and me, right here, right now. No leaves, no philosophy. Let's see if your control can handle my wildfire. The rest of the team tensed. Cole, don't, Taylor warned, stepping forward. But Naruto held up a hand, stopping her. He looked at Cole, his violet eyes holding not a hint of fear or anger, only a profound, weary disappointment. A fight will prove nothing. You will lose. Are you scared? Cole goaded, taking a fighting stance. No, Naruto said, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. I am not your enemy. Your pride is. But if you insist on a demonstration, then you will have one. He didn't take a stance. He simply stood, his hands loose at his sides, the picture of placid vulnerability. The rules are simple. If you can land a single, clean blow on me, I will leave the Animarium and never return. You can go back to your training, and I will trouble you no more. The stakes he just laid down were so immense that the air crackled. The other rangers stared, horrified. Naruto, no, Shayla's voice cried out. She had been watching from the edge of the grove, her presence unseen until now. You cannot. It's all right, Shayla, Naruto said, not taking his eyes off Cole. He needs this. He needs to see. He turned his gaze back to the fuming Red Ranger. But if I win, you will listen. You will set aside your pride, and you will learn. You will try, truly try, to hold the leaf. Do we have an agreement? Cole's lips twisted into a grim smile. It was an impossible bargain to refuse. Agreement. He didn't wait for a signal. He exploded into motion, his speed far greater than any normal human's. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, his fist aimed like a piston at Naruto's face. Naruto didn't move. At the very last microsecond, as Cole's knuckles were about to connect with his jaw, his head tilted a few degrees to the right. Cole's fist shot past, the wind from the blow ruffling Naruto's hair. The sheer force of the miss sent Cole stumbling forward a step. Cole recovered instantly, spinning with a powerful roundhouse kick aimed at Naruto's ribs. Naruto didn't block or retreat. He took a single, small step forward, inside the arc of the kick. The kick swept through the air where he had been a moment before. As Cole's leg passed, Naruto gently tapped the back of his knee with 2 fingers. It was not a strike. It was a perfectly timed, perfectly placed touch that disrupted Cole's balance at the most critical moment. Cole's leg gave out from under him, and he crashed to the ground in a heap. He was back on his feet in an instant, his face a mask of furious disbelief. He attacked again, a wild, ferocious flurry of punches and kicks. It was like watching a lion trying to attack the wind. Naruto's movements were a masterpiece of minimalism. A slight sway of the hips, a subtle turn of the shoulder, a half step to the side. He never moved more than a few inches. Yet Cole's furious assault never came close to landing. Naruto wasn't just dodging. He was flowing around Cole, using his opponent's own energy to dictate the rhythm of the non-fight. He was so calm, so effortless, that it was utterly humiliating. "Stand still and fight me," Cole roared, his frustration boiling over. "I am standing still," Naruto replied, his voice perfectly even as he ducked under a haymaker that could have felled an oak tree. "You were the one moving so much." Cole stopped, panting heavily, sweat dripping from his chin. He was exhausted, not from exertion, but from the sheer, maddening futility of his efforts. He looked at Naruto, who hadn't moved from his original spot, his breathing as slow and steady as a sleeping child's. He hadn't even raised his hands to block. "How?" Cole gasped out, the anger in his voice finally being replaced by a cracked, desperate confusion. "You see me as an opponent," Naruto explained, his voice softening once more. "So you attack where you think I will be. I do not see you as an opponent. I see you as a force. I see the flow of your anger, the trajectory of your pride. I am not dodging your fists, Cole. I am simply not standing where your anger is going to land." He took a step towards the humbled ranger. "Your strength is a tangible thing. You can feel it in your muscles. My control is intangible. It is a part of me. You cannot fight a concept. You have to understand it." He reached down and picked up a single, silver-green leaf from the ground. He held it out to Cole. "Your turn to try." Cole stared at the leaf in Naruto's hand, then at Naruto's calm, patient face. The fury was gone, washed away by a tide of profound, humbling defeat. He hadn't been beaten. He had been deconstructed. Every principle he had based his fighting style, his leadership, his very identity on, had just been proven insufficient. Slowly, his hand reached out and took the leaf. He didn't look at Naruto. He just turned and walked to the far side of the grove. His shoulders slumped. He sat down, his back to the others, and stared at the leaf in his palm. Naruto watched him go, then turned to the other, stunned rangers. "The lesson is the same for all of you. Now, let's begin again." Later that evening, as a lavender twilight settled over the Animarium, Naruto found Shayla at the western cliffs. She was standing at the edge of the silent zone, her eyes closed. A single, crystalline tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I can feel them," she whispered as he approached. "Their memories. Their ghosts. The land remembers the song, even if it can no longer sing it. Then we will teach it a new one," Naruto said. He came to stand beside her, and together they looked out at the deadened landscape. "Your power is to nurture what exists. My power is to create what does not. Let's combine them." He knelt down, placing his palm flat on the lifeless soil. Shayla knelt beside him, placing her hand over his. Naruto closed his eyes, and instead of pushing his own life force into the ground, he did something different. He reached into Shayla's spirit, finding the pure, gentle, nurturing energy of the island that she embodied. He drew it out, not forcefully, but as a gentle invitation. He then acted as a conduit, a lens, mixing her passive, healing energy with his own active, creative chakra. He filtered it, amplified it, and then channeled their combined power into the dead earth beneath their hands. It was not a violent, explosive rebirth like the one in the city plaza. It was a slow, gentle awakening. A single blade of grass at the edge of their palms began to glow with a soft, golden light. Then another. The glow spread outwards from their hands like a ripple in a pond, slow, serene, and unstoppable. As the light passed over the dead plants, it did not just restore them, it transformed them. The whispering orchids bloomed again, but now their petals had veins of pure, liquid gold. The sun chaser ferns unfurled, their leaves now tipped with a soft, silvery luminescence. The ground itself, once silent, began to hum with a new, gentle song, a melody born of two worlds, of two guardian souls. Shayla watched, tears of joy now streaming down her face. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She looked at Naruto, at their joined hands, and felt a connection so profound, so absolute, that it transcended words. It was a perfect harmony. A shared act of creation that bound them together on a level deeper than flesh or spirit. He was not just a visitor to her world anymore. He had become a part of its foundation. High atop the temple roof, under a canopy of unfamiliar stars, Taylor found Cole. He was still sitting, staring at the leaf in his hand. He had been there for hours, unmoving. He was right, you know, she said, her voice soft in the night air. She sat down near him, but not too close, giving him his space. I know, Cole said, his voice rough. He didn't look up. I've always led with my strength. It's all I've ever had. From the jungle to the rangers. Roar the loudest, hit the hardest. It always worked. Until you met someone who doesn't need to roar, Taylor finished for him. She looked up at the stars. When I was in flight school, there was a simulator test they called the Cobra's Eye. You had to fly through a canyon, at night, in a storm, with a dozen enemy bogies on your tail. Most guys tried to outfly it. They'd pull high G turns, hit the afterburners, try to power their way through. They all failed. The only way to beat it was to relax. To stop fighting storm and let the wind currents guide you. To feel the plane as an extension of your own body, not just a machine you were piloting. She looked at him. You've been trying to outfly the storm, Cole. Naruto. He is the storm. And the calm at its center, all at once. Cole was silent for a long time. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and let it out. He wasn't focusing on his power. He wasn't trying to command anything. He was just listening. To the night air, to the hum of the island, to the small, living thing in his hand. The leaf trembled, and then, for the first time, it stuck. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Severing of Souls. The Grove of Beginnings had ceased to be a place of frustration and had become a sanctuary of focus. The Rangers no longer saw the exercises as chores, but as a path. The change was most profound in Cole. The wildfire of his energy had not been extinguished. It had been banked, controlled, its heat now focused into a single, intense point of light. He could now hold a leaf to his palm for an hour without it so much as trembling. Danny, whose gentle spirit had always been in tune with the Animarium, discovered. He could coax flowers to bloom with a touch. Max, ever the showman, learned to manipulate small currents of water in the central pool, creating intricate, dancing shapes, a feat of fine control that was a universe away from the brute force of his shark fins. Alyssa and Taylor, the two most disciplined members of the team, excelled in their own ways. Alyssa, the scientist, began to perceive the energy of the world as a complex, beautiful equation, and she learned to subtly rewrite it, mending bruised plants and calming agitated animals with a quiet projection of her will. Taylor, the pilot, AP, applied her understanding of vectors and controlled force. She could now create a small, contained whirlwind around her hand, a perfect miniature of the storms she once flew through, its power held in exquisite, disciplined check. They were all stronger, but it was a quiet strength, a confidence that came not from the ability to shout, but from the knowledge that they could now be heard in a whisper. Naruto watched them, a sense of profound satisfaction warming his chest. They were learning. They were growing. It was the same feeling he'd had watching Konohamaru finally master the Rasengan, a teacher's quiet pride. He was so immersed in their progress that he almost missed the first, discordant note. It wasn't a psychic scream of pain or a sudden void like the last two attacks. It was a flicker, a brief, sharp spike of confusion and fear from a place of deep tranquility. It was the Elephant Zord. The connection to the Rangers' communicators was already open, but it was Shayla's voice that came through first. Laced with a new and unfamiliar panic. Rangers, it's the Ivory Valley. I am receiving a distress signal from the Elephant Zord, but it is corrupted. It feels wrong. On our way, Cole said, his voice calm and decisive. The transformation in his leadership was as stark as the one in his energy control. There was no bluster, no immediate call to arms, only a focused assessment of the situation. He looked to Naruto, a silent question in his eyes. Naruto nodded grimly. I feel it too. It's like a thread being frayed. Let's go. They arrived in the Ivory Valley via one of Shayla's water portals, emerging into a scene of unsettling contradiction. The valley, a hidden sanctuary of immense, fossilized trees and tranquil, jade-colored pools, was physically pristine. But the air was thick with a palpable sense of distress. The elephant Zord, usually a gentle, placid giant, was thrashing in the largest of the pools, its massive form sending waves of water crashing against the petrified trees. Its cries were not of rage, but of deep, gut-wrenching confusion, the sound of an animal caught in a trap it could not see. "It's on a rampage," Max shouted, his hands instinctively going to his growl phone. "No," Alyssa said immediately, her voice tight with empathy. As the elephant's chosen partner, she could feel its turmoil more acutely than the others. "It's not angry, it's terrified." She took a step forward, her hands outstretched. "Elephant, it's me, Alyssa, I'm here. What's wrong?" The great Zord's head snapped towards her, its crystalline eyes wide and unfocused. For a moment, a glimmer of recognition seemed to cross its face. Then, its eyes clouded over with a milky white film, and it let out a roar of pure, unadulterated fear, rearing back from her as if she were a predator. It was then that the org revealed itself. It did not appear in a flash of lightning or a plume of smoke. It simply coalesced from the shadows beneath one of the fossilized trees. It was humanoid, but its form was unstable, seeming to be woven from threads of smoke and mirrors. Its face was a constantly shifting kaleidoscope of other faces, a ranger's helmet, a Zord's eye, a hum. Anne's fearful expression, all melting into one another. It had no fixed shape, no true substance. This was Phantasm, the severer of souls. Less than such a strong bond, greater than its voice whispered, not in their minds, but seemingly from all around them. The sound of cracking glass and tearing silk. Less than such loyalty. Such trust. How boring. Allow me to introduce a more interesting dynamic. Greater than. It raised a hand woven of pure shadow. The milky film over the elephant Zord's eyes intensified. It suddenly saw Alyssa not as its partner, but as a cruel zookeeper, her outstretched hands holding not comfort, but chains and a whip. At the same time, the rangers saw a horrifying illusion projected over the Zord. Its skin seemed to crack, revealing molten magma beneath, its eyes burned with a malevolent red light, and its cries of fear were twisted into roars of demonic fury. "It's been corrupted," Cole yelled, his instincts screaming at him to engage the threat. "We have to subdue it before it hurts itself or tears the valley apart." "No, wait," Alyssa cried, seeing the truth even as the illusion tried to blind her. "It's a trick, can't you feel it? It's not rampaging, it's panicking." Phantasm laughed, the sound a discordant symphony of doubt. "Less than which is the truth, Rangers? The monster you see before you? Or the partner she claims is still there? Can you really be sure?" Greater than. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. It was using their own protective instincts, their very nature as heroes, against them. The more they tried to save the valley by subduing the Zord, the more they would terrorize the already frightened creature. Validating the lies it was being fed and deepening the rift. Naruto's Rinnegan cut through the deception like a surgeon's scalpel. He didn't see a demonic, lava-filled beast. He saw the terrified elephant Zord. And he saw the insidious, shimmering threads of psychic energy that connected Phantasm to the Zord's optic nerves and auditory centers. He also saw finer, weaker threads connected to the Rangers themselves, subtly amplifying their aggression and fear, clouding their judgment. "Alyssa is right," Naruto said, his voice cutting through the rising panic. He pointed towards the shimmering org. "That creature is a parasite. It's feeding the Zord illusions of you as its tormentors, and it's showing you an illusion of the Zord as a monster. It's not attacking either of you directly. It's attacking the bond between you. So how do we fight it?" Danny asked, his own gentle nature recoiling from the idea of striking the Zord he considered a friend. "If we attack the org, will it hurt the elephant? Its life force is tied to the Zord's sensory system," Naruto confirmed, his eyes tracing the glowing, parasitic threads. "A direct, explosive attack on the org would be like performing brain surgery with a sledgehammer. The psychic backlash could permanently damage the elephant's mind." The dilemma silenced them. They were warriors, armed with weapons of immense power. And their enemy had created a situation where every instinct they had was wrong, where every weapon they possessed was useless. "Less than what will you do, heroes?" Greater than Phantasm mocked. Less than will you strike down your friend to save the day? Or will you stand by and watch it tear itself apart in its madness? Such a delicious choice. Greater than. The elephant Zord, driven to a frenzy by the horrifying images being fed to it, slammed its massive head against the trunk of a petrified tree, a deep crack spider webbing across the ancient stone. We don't have time to think. Cole gritted out, the illusion making him see the act as one of malicious destruction. Yes, we do. Taylor's voice rang out, sharp and clear as a pilot's command. She was looking at Naruto, then at Alyssa, her mind processing the situation not as a brawl, but as a system failure. The system is the bond. The virus is the illusion. You don't fix a computer by smashing the monitor. You have to bypass the virus and reboot the core programming. She turned to Alyssa, her eyes filled with a surprising, fierce faith. The core programming is you. Your connection. You have to get through to it. Naruto nodded, a look of profound respect on his face. Taylor understood. She saw the tactical reality beyond the physical battlefield. She's right, Alyssa. Force will only validate the lie. You have to prove the bond is real. You must become a trut. So absolute that the illusion breaks against it. Alyssa looked from the thrashing, terrified giant to Naruto's calm, certain face. The training in the grove, the endless hours spent feeling the life in a single leaf, suddenly clicked into place. It wasn't about power. It was about connection. It was about listening. She took a deep breath, and the world seemed to slow down. She reached out with the new, refined senses Naruto had helped her awaken. She pushed past the roaring, demonic illusion, past the psychic noise of the org, and listened for the gentle, steady heartbeat of her partner. She found it, faint and erratic. But there, I have to get closer, she said with a quiet resolve that stunned the others. Alyssa, no, it'll crush you, Max yelled. It won't, she said, her voice filled with a faith that was beyond reason. She looked at Cole. Trust me. Cole looked at her, then at Naruto, then back at the illusion of the raging monster. He saw the memory of himself, attacking Naruto with blind fury. And Naruto simply, not being where his anger was. He had been taught that strength wasn't always the answer. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and when he opened them, the red haze of the illusion seemed to lessen. He gave a single, sharp nod. Go. Alyssa deactivated her helmet, then her entire suit. In a flash of white light, she was standing in her simple civilian clothes, vulnerable, weaponless. She began to walk towards the raging Zord, her steps slow and steady. To the Zord, she was the approaching tormentor, chains in hand. It roared, a sound of pure panic, and reared up. Its massive front legs poised to crush her into the wet stone. The other rangers cried out, their hands flying to their weapons. Hold, Naruto commanded, his voice a thunderclap that froze them in place. Watch, listen. Alyssa didn't flinch. She didn't look at the titanic legs hanging over her like the judgment of God. She closed her eyes, placing a hand over her heart. She didn't shout. She projected her thoughts, her feelings, her very soul, a pure, unwavering stream of everything she and the elephant Zord had ever shared. Less than I'm here. It's me, Alyssa. Remember the day we met? You were hiding, and I brought you the sweet water flowers. Remember how we practiced our combination, how your armor protected all of our friends. I am not your enemy. I am your partner. I am your friend. I trust you. Greater than. Her projection was not an attack. It was a song. It was the resonant frequency of their bond, the truth Naruto had spoken of. The org's illusions were a cacophony of lies, but Alyssa's message was a single, perfect, clear note. The elephant Zord froze, its massive legs trembling in the air. The milky white film over its eyes flickered. Through the terrifying image of the zookeeper, it saw a faint, golden aura. The aura of its partner. The lie was powerful, but the truth of their bond, reinforced by Alyssa's absolute act of faith, was more fundamental. With a sound like a million shattering mirrors, the illusion broke. The Zord saw her, just Alyssa, standing before it, smiling, her hand over her heart. It let out a low, gentle rumble, a sound of profound relief, and slowly lowered its legs. Its great head bowing until its trunk could gently touch her shoulder. The psychic feedback was cataclysmic for Phantasm. The pure, resonant energy of the restored bond blasted back along its parasitic threads, severing them and overloading its insubstantial form. It shrieked, its form solidifying for the first time into a pathetic, quivering creature of twisted shadow. Now, Naruto said, his voice cold as ice. The Rangers didn't need a second command. They moved as one, not with overwhelming force, but with the perfect, synchronized precision of their new training. Cole flowed forward, not with a savage slash, but with a pinpoint strike that shattered the orc's right arm. Taylor and Max flanked it, their attacks disabling its legs. Danny and Alyssa, working in perfect concert with her restored elephant, unleashed a focused beam of energy that struck the creature dead center. It was not a chaotic barrage, but a surgical strike. Phantasm, the severer of souls, dissolved with a final, surprised whimper. Erased by a power it could not comprehend, trust. As the last echoes of the battle faded, Alyssa remained with her Zord, murmuring to it, soothing its frayed spirit. The other Rangers gathered around Naruto, a new, deeper respect in their eyes. Later, in the Zord hangar, the air still humming with the quiet, immense presences of the resting giants, Taylor approached Naruto. She was leaning against the leg of her eagle Zord, her arms crossed. A pilot's greatest asset isn't skill or reflexes, she said, her gaze fixed on some distant point. It's trust. Trust in your machine, your wingman, your own gut. If you lose that, you're just a flying coffin. I knew what Alyssa had to do because I've had to do it a dozen times at 10,000 feet. I just never thought I'd see it applied to a giant robot elephant. She finally looked at him, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips. You don't just teach people how to fight. You teach them how to be better at who they already are. Greatness isn't something you give to people, Taylor, Naruto replied, his voice equally soft. It's something you help them find in themselves. You're a pilot. Alyssa is a nurturer. Cole is a leader. I'm just showing you how to apply those truths on a different level. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, a shared understanding passing between them. It was a connection born not of flirtation or romance, but of the profound respect between two highly competent individuals who recognized the same core principles in each other, despite their vastly different worlds. And in that shared respect, something deeper was quietly taking root. From her scrying pool, Shayla watched the scene. She saw the renewed bond between Alyssa and the elephant. She saw the quiet, powerful understanding growing between the soldier and the sage. She saw a team that had been forged in combat being reforged in spirit, becoming something stronger, something more whole. A faint, bittersweet smile touched her lips. He was saving her world, not just by fighting its monsters, but by healing its heroes. And for that, she would gladly endure the quiet ache of her own lonely, loving heart. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Library of Faded Light. The Grove of Beginnings was no longer a place of testing, but of synthesis. The Rangers moved with a newfound fluidity, their training a silent, intricate dance of elemental forces. Taylor stood on the shore of the black glass pond, her eyes closed. She was not practicing combat, but communion. In her cupped hands, a perfect sphere of air spun. A contained cyclone the size of a crystal ball. It was utterly stable, its winds howling in a silence only she could hear. She was learning to command the storm not by shouting it down, but by becoming its calm, unshakable center. Naruto watched from a short distance away, leaning against the trunk of an ancient, silver-leafed tree. He felt a quiet pride in her progress. She had taken his lessons on control and applied them with a pilot's intuitive grasp of physics and flow, achieving a level of precision that even he found remarkable. The pressure differential is almost perfect, he commented, his voice not breaking the tranquility of the grove. But you're holding it together with discipline. Try holding it with belief. Believe that the air wants to be in that shape. Don't command it, convince it. Taylor's brow furrowed in concentration. She altered her mental approach, shifting from the mindset of a pilot imposing her will on a machine to that of a bird trusting the wind to hold it aloft. The spinning sphere of air shimmered, and a faint, golden light began to glow at its core. It seemed to gain weight, substance, its existence becoming less an act of will and more a natural fact of the world. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. It was a new kind of flight, a new kind of freedom. Their peaceful exercise was shattered by a wave of pure, conceptual vertigo. It was not a sound or a tremor, but a fundamental wrongness that rippled through the very fabric of the Animarium. It felt like a line of code being deleted from the source of reality. The golden light in Taylor's hand sputtered and died. The silver leaves on the ancient trees around them flickered, becoming momentarily transparent. In the Zord hangar, miles away, the brilliant stripes on Alyssa's white tiger Zord faded to a dull gray for 3 horrifying seconds before snapping back into existence. Shayla's panicked voice echoed in their minds, not through a communicator, but through a raw, empathic broadcast of pure terror. Less than the Foundation. Something is unwriting the Foundation. The archives. Greater than. Naruto was already moving, the serene teacher replaced instantly by the seasoned warrior. He appeared beside Taylor, his hand on her shoulder to steady her. What are the archives? The other rangers were already converging on the temple, their faces pale with a shared, nameless dread. Ey found Shayla on her knees before the central pool, her hands pressed to her temples, her body trembling. It is the oldest place, she explained, her voice a ragged whisper. The memory of the Animarium. The soul of every Zord. Every plant, every stone that has ever been a part of this island is recorded there. It is not a history book, it is a living history. It is the source of the island's continuity, its sense of self. To damage it is to inflict a form of dementia upon the world itself. Who protects it? Cole asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, his new calm a steel sheath for his lion's heart. The archivist, Shayla said, a new wave of fear washing over her. Lyra, she has not left her post in over 1,000 years. She is one with the place. If it is being unwritten, then so is she. The urgency was a cold fire in their veins. Shayla, with a monumental effort of will, opened a portal not of water, but of shimmering, memory-laden light. I cannot go with you. I must use my energy to reinforce the island's memory from here, to fight the fading. Go, find Lyra, save our past, or we will have no future. They stepped through the portal and into a reality that defied all physical law. They stood on a pathway of woven light in the midst of an infinite, silver forest. The trees were colossal, crystalline structures that pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence. The leaves were thin, translucent shards of crystal, each containing a swirling nebula of light, a captured moment, a living memory. The air was cool and still, smelling of old parchment and ozone, and the only sound was a constant, near subliminal whisper, the collective sigh of a billion memories. This was the timeless archives. In the distance, they saw the disturbance. A section of the crystalline forest was flickering, the light of its memory leaves dimming and turning to a fine, gray dust that fell like snow. And in the center of this encroaching emptiness stood a woman. She was tall and impossibly slender, with hair the color of spun moonlight that fell to her ankles. Her eyes, the color of faded parchment, were filled with a fierce, desperate light. She was clad in simple, flowing robes woven from what looked like solidified motes of dust. This was Lyra, the archivist. She was not fighting with fists or blades, but with pure will. She held her hands out, and 3 of silver light flowed from her fingertips, weaving a protective barrier around the fading trees, trying to hold their memories together through sheer force of preservation. Facing her was the source of the decay. The orb was a shimmering, heat-hazed distortion in the air, a vaguely humanoid shape made of forgotten moments and lost time. It had no face, only a rippling void that seemed to drink the light and memory around it. This was yesterday's. Less than such a heavy burden, greater than the org's voice whispered, the sound of sand scouring stone. Less than all this remembering. All this history. Let it go. Let it be dust. Let it be nothing. Greater than. Every memory is a life. Lyra's voice was a clear, defiant bell in the whispering silence. And every life is sacred. You will not erase them. Yesterday's simply raised a shimmering, indistinct hand and pointed at a crystalline branch near the rangers. On its leaves swirled the memory of an ancient, stag-like Zord, its great antlers holding the light of a forgotten dawn. The org's power washed over it. The crystal leaves did not shatter, they simply turned to gray dust and drifted away. A wave of vertigo hit the rangers. Cole stumbled, a frown on his face. Wait, what were we just talking about? Max looked around, confused. I don't know, did we just get here? Man, I feel like I'm forgetting something important. Naruto alone remained unaffected. His mind, an anchor from another reality, was immune to the temporal erasure. He watched in horror as the very concept of the Stag Zord was wiped not just from the archives, but from the minds of his friends. Their history, their shared knowledge, was being actively and instantly rewritten. It's erasing existence, Naruto said, his voice grim. The Rangers looked at him, their confusion deepening. The org, it just erased a wild Zord from history. You can't remember it because it now never existed. The chilling implication of his words settled over them. How could they fight an enemy whose every action was instantly forgotten? Lyra, seeing them, cried out in warning. Do not engage it. Its touch erases purpose. Your weapons will forget how to strike. Your armor will forget how to protect. As if to prove her point, Yesterday's turned its attention to the approaching Rangers. It gestured, and a wave of its power washed over Danny. He raised his bison axe, but as the wave hit him, the weapon flickered, its form becoming momentarily translucent. He looked at it, his brow furrowed. What is this for? For a single, terrifying second, the muscle memory of 100 battles had vanished. Less than such sharp toys, greater than the org whispered. Asterisk less than let them be dull. Let them be forgotten. Greater than. It's up to me, Naruto realized. He was the only one who could retain the memory of the battle long enough to fight it. He was the only one whose history couldn't be unwritten. He moved, appearing directly between the org and the disoriented Rangers. Asterisk less than an anomaly, greater than yesterday's noted, its form rippling as it focused on him. Asterisk less than you do not belong. Your past is not written here. You have no history for me to erase. Greater than. You're wrong, Naruto said, his Rinnegan blazing to life, its concentric circles a stark purple against the silvery light of the archives. My history is the one thing you can't touch. Asterisk less than then I will simply erase your future. Greater than. The org lunged, its form dissolving into a blinding sandstorm of temporal dust. It wasn't a physical attack. It was an attempt to overwhelm Naruto's senses, to desync him from the present moment and leave him adrift in a sea of non-existence. The Rangers cried out as the storm engulfed him. But within the storm, Naruto was perfectly still. He closed his eyes, his sage senses reaching out. He couldn't fight this thing with a Rasengan or a punch. Force was meaningless against a concept. He had to fight memory with memory. He had to prove that the weight of what is infinitely greater than the emptiness of what wasn't. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his soul. He touched the network of the archives, the living library of the world. Lyra gasped as she felt his consciousness, not as an intruder, but as a kindred spirit, a being whose own life was a library of impossible stories. He didn't try to take the memories. He asked them for their help. Lend me your weight, he whispered to the forest of light. Lend me your truth. The entire archive responded. A billion leaves of crystal began to glow, their light pouring not outwards, but inwards, flowing along the pathways of light and into Naruto. He became a conduit for the entire history of the Animarium. He felt the birth of the first Zords, the slow crawl of glaciers, the silent growth of the first flowers, the rage of volcanoes, the first stirrings of conscious thought. He felt the joy, the sorrow, the love, the fear. The life of every being that had ever called this island home. The weight of it was apocalyptic, enough to shatter any normal mind into dust. But his mind, forged in war, tempered by the loneliness of a Jinchuriki, and expanded by the wisdom of a sage, held firm. He opened his eyes. They were no longer just the Rinnegan. They were swirling vortexes of pure, historical light, containing the birth and death of stars. He looked at the yesterday's org, which recoiled from the sheer, overwhelming presence of him. He raised his hand, the human path of the Rinnegan flaring to life. But he reversed its function. He was not there to extract a soul, but to implant a history. You want to erase memories. Naruto's voice was no longer his own. It was a chorus of a billion voices. The roar of ancient lions, the whisper of forgotten winds. Then remember this. He touched the org's formless core. And he pushed. He pushed the memory of the first sunrise. The taste of the first rainfall. The feeling of the first bond between a ranger and a Zord. He pushed the entirety of the planet's history, every single life, every single moment he had just absorbed, into the creature of pure emptiness. It was the ultimate paradox. A being of negation, force-fed an infinity of existence. The yesterday's org screamed, a sound that tore at the fabric of time itself. Its form destabilized, unable to contain the sheer, glorious weight of a world's story. It tried to erase the memories as they flooded in, but for every one it erased, a million more took its place. With a final, silent implosion, the yesterday's org collapsed in on itself, utterly annihilated by the very concept it sought to destroy. The temporal dust settled, and the stolen memories began to flow back into the archives. The branch of the Stag Zord reformed, its light bright and clear once more. The Rangers blinked, a collective gasp running through them as a billion years of history they hadn't known was missing settled back into their souls. The memory of the Stag Zord was there, as if it had never left. The memory of the battle, however, was a confusing, terrifying blur. All they knew for sure was that one moment they had been helpless, and the next, Naruto had been standing in a column of blinding, ancient light, and the threat was gone. Naruto swayed, the immense weight of the world's memories receding from his mind, leaving him feeling hollowed out and ancient. Lyra was at his side in an instant, her usual detachment gone, her hand on his arm to steady him. Her touch was cool, like old stone. "No one has ever done that," she whispered, her parchment-colored eyes wide with an emotion he couldn't decipher. It was a mixture of awe, reverence, and a deep, scholarly fascination that was intensely personal. The archivists are meant to be passive observers, to preserve what is. You took our entire history and wielded it as a sword. You are not just a part of this world's story, Naruto Uzumaki. You are a being who can rewrite its very syntax. She looked at him, at this impossible man who contained the echoes of another universe and had just held the entirety of hers within his soul. She had spent her immortal life in the company of ghosts and memories, a guardian of a static, unchanging past. And now she was face to face with the most dynamic, transformative force she had ever encountered. He was a living, breathing story that was still being written, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the archivist felt a desperate, compelling need to know how it would end. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The God of a Dying World. The twilight in the Grove of Beginnings was a sacred thing, a slow, gentle transition from the silver green of day to the deep, velvety indigo of night. The air was cool and still, carrying the scent of ancient earth and the faint, ozone tang of pure, concentrated life. It had become the Rangers' cloister, a place where the noise of battle was replaced by the deep, internal hum of their own growing power. They no longer trained their bodies, they calibrated their souls. Naruto stood with Shayla and Taylor near the edge of the black glass pond. The tension that had once defined his interactions with the team's most disciplined members had softened into a comfortable, profound respect. Shayla, her usual serene grace now tinged with a quiet, personal warmth whenever she was near him, was watching the surface of the pond, where tiny, perfect lotus flowers made of pure, solidified light bloomed and faded in a slow, rhythmic pulse. It was an exercise Naruto had taught her, a way of projecting her nurturing spirit not just as a passive aura, but as an active, creative force. Taylor was not watching the pond. She was watching the sky, her pilot's eyes tracking the slow drift of the clouds. In her hand, she held a single, silver-green leaf. It wasn't stuck to her palm with effort. It floated an inch above her skin, held aloft, on a perfectly controlled cushion of air, spinning in a slow, hypnotic pirouette. She had moved beyond adhesion and into the realm of pure dynamics, mastering the element that had always been her home. "It's quiet," Taylor said, her voice a low murmur that didn't disturb the peace. "Too quiet. Every time we find a new level, the universe seems to hold its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Perhaps the universe is not waiting for a shoe to drop," Shayla countered, her voice as soft as the glowing petals on the water. "Perhaps it is simply listening to the new song we are teaching it." She looked at Naruto, and in her ancient, gentle eyes, there was a depth of feeling that was as vast and profound as the sky itself. It was not the simple infatuation of a girl, but the deep, resonant love of a being who had been alone for millennia and had finally found her equal. Naruto felt her gaze, and the warmth of it settled over him, a welcome balm on a soul that still bore the scars of 1,000 battles. He looked from Shayla's quiet, absolute devotion to Taylor's sharp, unwavering respect. They were the twin anchors of this new, strange world for him, the spirit and the soldier, the heart and the mind. He felt a connection to both of them, a complex, interwoven feeling that was as powerful as it was new. It was a peace he had never known, a sense of belonging he had always craved. And it was this peace, this perfect, fragile moment of harmony, that Master Org chose to shatter. It began as a tremor, not in the earth, but in the very soul of the Animarium. The light lotus flowers on the pond dissolved into steam. The leaf floating above Taylor's hand dropped as if shot. A low, guttural groan echoed from the island's core, a sound of geological agony. The sky, a moment before a canvas of serene twilight, was instantly blotted out by a swirling, greasy black vortex that pulsed with a malevolent, crimson light. The air became thick, heavy, reeking of ancient decay and industrial poison. The very life force of the island, the vibrant, golden energy that permeated everything, was being suppressed, choked, smothered under a blanket of pure, weaponized despair. Shayla, Naruto was at her side in an instant as she staggered, a hand flying to her chest, her face pale as death. "He is attacking the heart," she gasped, her voice strained with a pain that was not her own, but the island's. "Not the forest, not the Zords. He is pouring his essence directly into the nexus of life, the source of all power on the Animarium. He is trying to perform a heart transplant, and replace it with his own." A piercing, island-wide shriek of agony confirmed her words. In the Zord hangar, the great beasts cried out, the light in their eyes flickering as their connection to their power source was being severed. In the timeless archives, Lyra watched in horror as entire forests of memory crystals began to crack, their light bleeding away into nothingness. Cole, Alyssa, Danny, and Max arrived in a flash of colored light, their faces grim, their new, quiet confidence replaced by a cold, hard readiness. "Report," Cole said, his eyes on the pulsating, diseased sky. There was no trace of his old arrogance, only the focused calm of a true commander. "This is it," Naruto said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. His Rinnegan was active, and he could see the horrifying truth of the situation. He saw the lifeblood of the Animarium being drained away, siphoned into the swirling vortex above. And he saw what was forming within that vortex. It was a concentration of malice so profound, so absolute, that it made every org they had ever faced seem like a pale shadow. "He's not sending a monster. He's sending himself, or a piece of himself so large it might as well be." As he spoke, the vortex contracted, and from its foul heart, a figure descended. It did not land with a crash. It landed with a sickening, wet thud that seemed to deaden the very ground beneath it. It was a god of ruin. It stood over 10 feet tall, its body a horrific fusion of twisted, cancerous-looking biomass and corroded, weeping metal. Its skin was the color of a deep bruise, pulsating with a net work of crimson veins that glowed with stolen life energy. One arm was a massive, club-like appendage of bone and rock, the other a nest of writhing, metallic tentacles tipped with surgical sharp blades. Its head was a helmet of jagged obsidian, and from within its visor burned not 2 eyes, but a single, baleful, crimson star of pure, undiluted hatred. This was the Nemesis Org, the avatar of the Master. The moment it landed, the grove of beginnings began to die. The silver leaves on the ancient trees withered to black ash. The black glass pond cracked, its water turning to bubbling sludge. A circle of absolute decay spread from its feet, a wave of anti-life that was horrifyingly familiar, yet infinitely more powerful than the blight they had fought before. The Rangers morphed in a single, defiant flash of light. "It ends here. Now," Cole roared, his voice amplified by his helmet. Wild force, full assault. They moved as one, a symphony of controlled, elemental fury. They did not charge blindly. They executed a complex, interwoven attack pattern that they had practiced to perfection under Naruto's tutelage. Max and Danny created a pincer, their shark fins and bison axe moving to lock the creature's limbs. Alyssa and Taylor provided support from the flanks, Alyssa's tiger baton creating a dazzling, distracting light show while Taylor's eagle sword sliced at the creature's unarmed ored joints with the precision of a surgeon. Cole, the tip of the spear, flowed between them, his lion fangs not a wild slash, but a series of pinpoint strikes aimed at the creature's glowing, crimson veins. It was a beautiful, masterful attack, and it was utterly, hopelessly useless. The Nemesis Org didn't even bother to raise a defense. Their weapons struck its body, and simply, stopped. The kinetic energy, the elemental power, the sheer force of their Zords, spirits was siphoned away, drawn into its pulsating form without effect. Less than your life is a fleeting spark, greater than its voice echoed, a chorus of every org they had ever fought. A grinding, metallic roar of absolute contempt. Asterisk less than I am the eternal, patient darkness. Your struggles are nothing. Greater than. It moved, with a lazy, contemptuous sweep of its bone and rock arm. It swatted all 5 rangers out of the air as if they were insects. They slammed into the dying trees with cries of pain, sparks flying from their suits as their protective energy fields overloaded and collapsed. They fell to the ground, demorphed and broken, their new power utterly invalidated. Naruto moved, appearing in front of his fallen students in a flicker of motion, shielding them from the creature's advance. He looked at the Nemesis org, his Rinnegan analyzing it on a level beyond physics. He saw the stolen life force of the Animarium churning within it. He saw the core of Master Org's own being burning at its heart. And he saw that it was an almost perfect copy of himself, a being designed to absorb and command vast amounts of energy. But where his power came from a billion points of life, of bonds, of memories, its power came from a single, infinite point of absolute hatred. You have their attention, Naruto said, his voice dangerously calm. Now you have mine. Less than the anomaly. Greater than the Nemesis org growled. Asterisk less than the stolen god. I am here to correct the error of your existence. Greater than. It charged, its speed belying its immense size. It was not a clumsy, lumbering beast, it was an apex predator. Its movements economical and brutally efficient. Its massive club-like arms swung down, aimed at turning Naruto and the fallen rangers into a crater. Naruto met the charge. He didn't try to stop the blow with brute force. He raised his hand, the black receiver of the outer path materializing from his palm. He met the descending fist with his own. The instant they made contact, he used the outer path's power not to repel, but to sever. He cut the creature's conceptual connection to the stolen Animarium energy that was fueling its strength. For a fraction of a second, the Nemesis org's arm faltered. Its power source cut off. In that instant, Naruto flowed around it, his hand wreathed in the spiraling energy of a Rasengan. He slammed it into the creature's back. Explosion of chakra tore a gaping hole in its biometallic flesh. But the wound began to heal instantly. The Nemesis org roared, not in pain, but in fury, and re-established its connection to the dying heart of the island. The stolen life force poured back into it, stronger than before. Its tentacles lashed out, faster than a striking cobra. Naruto was forced back, dodging and weaving, the razor. Sharp tips of the tentacles leaving deep gouges in the stone where he had been moments before. The battle that followed was a clash of gods. The grove of beginnings was torn apart, the ancient trees splintering into dust. The ground itself cracking under the force of their blows. Naruto used the full arsenal of the 6 paths. He pushed with almighty push, pulled with universal pull. He absorbed energy attacks with the Preta path and unleashed devastating mechanical assaults with the Asura path. But for every blow he landed, the Nemesis org healed itself, drawing more and more power from the dying Animarium. It was a battle of attrition, and Naruto was losing. His own chakra reserves, while vast, were finite. The org's power source was an entire world. Shayla watched from the temple, her hands pressed against the central pool, which was now black and cold. She was pouring her own life force, her very essence, into the island, fighting a desperate, losing battle to keep its heart from stopping completely. She could feel Naruto's struggle through their bond, his frustration, the slow, inevitable drain on his power. He cannot win, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Not like this. It is a battle of infinities. And the infinity of hatred is consuming the infinity of life. Back on the battlefield, Naruto was forced to a knee, breathing heavily. The anti-life aura of the Nemesis org was a constant, oppressive weight, making it harder and harder for him to gather the natural energy for his sage mode. Less than you see, greater than the Nemesis boomed, its single red eye glowing with triumphant malice. Asterisk less than your bonds are a weakness. The lives you protect are merely fuel for my ascension. I will consume this world, and then I will find yours and consume it as well. I will drink all of creation, and leave only the perfect. Silent monument of my own being. Greater than. It raised its club-like arm for the final blow. The fallen rangers watched, helpless, their hearts filled with despair. It was in that moment, at the absolute nadir of hope, that Naruto looked past the monster. He saw Taylor, struggling to pull a wounded Max behind a shattered rock. He saw Cole, forcing himself to his feet, Tr. Ying to place his own broken body between the org and Alyssa. He saw Shayla's desperate, loving energy flowing into the very ground he knelt on. He saw the defiant, ghostly light of the timeless archives, where Lyra was fighting to preserve the idea of them, even if their bodies were destroyed. He saw his bonds, and the Nemesis org had just called them a weakness. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Naruto's face. You really don't get it, do you? He said, his voice quiet but clear. He closed his eyes. He did not reach outwards for more power. He reached inwards. He spoke to the 9 ancient, powerful consciousnesses that had been with him his entire life. Kurama, Shukaku, Matabi, all of you. Are you with me? A symphony of roars and growls answered in his soulscape, a chorus of absolute, unwavering loyalty. Always, kid. Kurama's voice was a rumbling inferno of pride. He reached deeper, past the tailed beasts, to the core of his own power. He touched the serene, oceanic energy. Why of the Animarium that Shayla had shared with him. He touched the billion memories of the archives that Lyra had shown him. He felt the fierce, unyielding spirit of the soldier, the brilliant, analytical mind of the scientist. The gentle, nurturing heart of the caregiver, the playful, chaotic energy of the rogue, the steadfast, loyal soul of the protector, and the fiery, proud spirit of the leader. He took all of it. Every bond, every memory, every life he had ever touched, from his world and from this one. He did not just borrow their power. He became the living nexus of it all. The Nemesis org hesitated, its final blow held in check by a sudden, instinctual fear. Naruto opened his eyes. They were no longer the Rinnegan. They were no longer the eyes of a sage. They were pure, white voids of infinite potential. And from their centers, a new, golden, 9-tomo Rinnegan bloomed into existence, an emblem of a power that transcended worlds. His hair bleached to a blinding white, and 9, truth-seeking orbs, black as absolute zero, materialized behind him. A cloak of pure, golden white energy erupted around him, a fusion of 6 paths sage mode and the primal life force of the Animarium. You are a god of a dying world, Naruto's voice boomed, now a chorus of 10,000 voices, human and beast, ancient and new. Allow me to introduce you to the collective will of 2. He raised his hand. One of the truth-seeking orbs flew into his palm, and he began to pour everything he was into it. He poured the chakra of the 9-tailed beasts. He poured the life force of the Animarium. He poured the temporal energy of the archives. He poured the courage and hope of the Wild Force Rangers. The orb began to expand, not into a Rasengan, but into something new. It was a sphere of impossible energy. In its heart was the swirling, destructive chaos of a tailed beast bomb, but surrounding it, containing it, was a swirling, silver galaxy of memories and a vibrant, green nebula of pure, creative life force. It was creation and destruction, past and future, all held in perfect, terrifying balance. He called it the Genesis Sphere. Less than what? What is that? Greater than the Nemesis org stammered, its bravado gone. Replaced by the first and only fear it had ever known. It was looking at its own antithesis. The end of your story, Naruto said. He didn't throw it, he simply thrust his hand forward. The Genesis Sphere crossed the distance between them in an instant that seemed to stretch for an eternity. The Nemesis org raised its arms to defend itself, but it was like trying to stop the Big Bang with a sheet of paper. The sphere made contact, and there was no explosion. There was only light. A silent, absolute, all-consuming white light erupted from the point of impact, erasing everything. The Nemesis org, the blighted ground, the poisoned sky, all of it was simply unwritten from existence. The stolen life force it had hoarded was released, purified, and sent surging back into the heart of the Animarium in a single glorious wave. Across the island, the Zords roared in triumph. The central pool in the temple erupted in a geyser of pure, crystal-clear water. The dying trees of the Grove of Beginnings exploded with new, vibrant life, their leaves 1,000 shades of impossible, beautiful color. The light faded, leaving Naruto standing in the center of a reborn, miraculously healed grove. The white-hot power receded, his hair returning to its blonde and white streaks, his eyes to their familiar, rippled violet. The 9 truth-seeking orbs dissolved into nothing. He swayed, the sheer, unimaginable cost of channeling so many lives finally hitting him. He fell to one knee, then collapsed completely. He didn't hit the ground. 2 figures were there to catch him. On his right, Taylor. Her face streaked with dirt and tears, her soldier's composure completely gone, replaced by a raw, desperate relief. On his left, Shayla, her divine grace imbued with a fierce, protective love, her spirit a warm, healing blanket around his own. They lowered him gently to the new, soft grass, their hands lingering on him, their shared concern, their shared love, and unspoken, undeniable truth in the quiet aftermath. The other rangers, battered but alive, gathered around them, their faces a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a loyalty so absolute it had been forged into their very souls. They had not just been saved. They had been reborn. Naruto looked up at the 2 women who held him, their faces blurring in his exhausted vision. He had fallen into this world a lonely, victorious god. But now, in the heart of this quiet grove, surrounded by the family he had forged in the crucible of battle, he was something more. He was home. Chapter 10 End. Chapter 11. The Weight of the Dawn. The silence that followed the detonation of the Genesis sphere was more profound than any that Lord Silencio could have ever hoped to command. It was not an absence of sound, but a fullness of it, the collective, held breath of a world reborn. The Grove of Beginnings, a moment before a cratered, blighted hellscape, was now a riot of impossible life. Trees of silver and gold stood tall, their leaves humming with a soft, internal light. The ground was a carpet of moss that shimmered with every color of the rainbow, and the air itself felt clean, crisp, and charged with a vitality so potent it was almost intoxicating. In the center of this miracle lay its architect. Naruto's transcendent form had receded, leaving him pale and frighteningly still, the divine power that had wreathed him now vanished, leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. He was caught before he hit the ground, supported by the 2 pillars of his new world, Shayla's divine grace and Taylor's unyielding strength. The rest of the rangers, their bodies a symphony of aches and bruises, scrambled to their feet, their eyes wide with a mixture of triumphant awe and raw, primal fear for their fallen leader. The being who had just rewritten the laws of their reality now looked as fragile as a broken doll. "Get him to the chamber of still waters," Shayla commanded, her voice regaining its authority, though it was now aced with a tremor of personal anguish that tore at the hearts of her rangers. Now, his spirit is frayed. He poured too much of himself into that final act. Cole, his face a grim mask of determination, took charge. His earlier rivalry felt like a memory from a different lifetime. He now looked at Naruto with the fierce, protective loyalty of a pack leader for his alpha. "Danny, you're the strongest. Help me carry him. Max, scout ahead. Ensure the path is clear. Alyssa, Taylor, stay with the princess. Her connection to him is our only way of monitoring his condition." It was a seamless, efficient display of leadership, born from the hard-won lessons of Naruto's tutelage. They moved as a single, cohesive unit, their movements gentle as they lifted Naruto's unconscious form. He was unnervingly light, as if the sheer spiritual weight of his final attack had burned away some of his physical substance. They carried him through the reborn corridors of the temple, their heavy footsteps the only sound. The Animarium itself seemed to be singing a quiet hymn of gratitude around them, the light from the glowing stones pulsing in a soft, steady rhythm, like a planetary heartbeat restored. The chamber of still waters was a place few had ever seen. It was a circular, subterranean grotto, open to the sky through a single, perfect oculus in the cavern ceiling. In the center of the chamber was a large, shallow pool filled with water that seemed to be spun from liquid moonlight, glowing with a soft, silver-blue luminescence. The air was cool and smelled of clean stone and a single, unidentifiable night-blooming flower. This was the Animarium's soul forge, the place where the spirits of Zords went to heal after grievous injury. No human had ever been brought here before. They laid Naruto in the center of the pool. The moment his body touched the surface, the water reacted. It did not splash or ripple. It enveloped him, rising to cradle his form just below the surface, the glowing liquid molding to his every contour. The water around him began to glow with a warmer, golden light, a reflection of the immense, residual life force that still clung to his spirit. He is stable, Shayla breathed, a measure of relief softening the hard lines of her face. She knelt at the edge of the pool, her hand hovering just over the surface of the water, her senses connected to both Naruto and the chamber itself. The waters are replenishing his physical energy. But his spiritual wounds, they are deep. He gave away pieces of his own story to create that power. He must now find his way back to himself. The Rangers stood vigil, a silent, weary guard of honor. But as the hours stretched on, the adrenaline of the battle faded, replaced by the crushing weight of exhaustion. The rest of you need to recover, Shayla said softly, not taking her eyes off Naruto. Your own spirits are bruised. Cole, post a watch at the entrance to the grove. Master Org has been dealt a crippling blow, but his hatred is a weed that will grow back in the most poisoned soil. We must be vigilant. Cole nodded, his loyalty absolute. He led the others out, leaving the grotto in a profound, intimate silence. Occupied only by the unconscious sage and the two women who, in their own vastly different ways, loved him. The silence that settled between Shayla and Taylor was not empty. It was heavy with unspoken words, with the shared memory of his collapse, of their hands meeting as they caught him. They sat on opposite sides of the healing pool, two queens guarding their fallen king, the silver blue light of the water painting their faces in soft, ethereal strokes. Taylor was the first to speak, her voice low, stripped of its usual military briskness. I've seen pilots black out from pulling too many Gs. I've seen soldiers collapse from exhaustion after a 72-hour patrol. I've never seen anything like this. It's like, his engine ran so hot it almost melted the frame. He did not just use his own power, Shayla explained, her gaze distant, lost in the swirling golden light around Naruto's form. He became a conduit. He channeled the life of this world, the history of this world, and the pain of his own. The Genesis sphere was not a weapon. It was a judgment, delivered by the collective will of two universes. The cost of wielding such a truth is almost too great to comprehend. Taylor looked at the princess, seeing not a rival, but a fellow witness to a miracle. You love him. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact, a shared and acknowledged truth that had been hanging between them for weeks. Shayla's serene mask did not crack, but a profound, ancient sorrow entered her eyes. I have watched over this island for 5,000 years. I have loved every leaf, every stone, every life that has ever graced it. But it was the love of a guardian for her charge. A distant, nurturing, and solitary love. She finally looked across the pool at Taylor, her gaze direct and filled with a surprising, painful clarity. He is the first being I have ever met who did not need my protection. He did not need me to be a princess, a guardian, or a goddess. He simply saw me, the woman, and who has been alone in her own soul for longer than human history. How could I not love him? The confession, so pure and so deeply felt, left no room for jealousy. It was too vast, too honest. Taylor felt her own carefully constructed emotional walls crumble under the weight of it. I get it, she said, her voice rough with an emotion she rarely allowed herself to show. I've spent my entire adult life in a cockpit or a barracks. Everything is procedure, checklists, mission parameters. Emotions are a liability at 30,000 feet. You compartmentalize. You focus on the objective. You mourn your dead when you're back on the ground. And then you suit up and do it again. She looked down at her own hands, then at Naruto's still form. He doesn't compartmentalize. He feels everything. The pain of that dying org. The fear in Cole's pride. The hope in Alyssa's theories. He takes it all in. He doesn't see it as a liability. He sees it as the objective. He's the most competent, powerful, terrifyingly effective warrior I have ever seen. And he's also the most profoundly, deeply human. He makes me feel like it's okay to be more than just a soldier. That it's okay to fly without a plane. They fell silent again. Two women from different worlds, a goddess of eternal patience and a soldier of sharp, finite moments, bound together by the impossible man floating between them. They were not rivals. They were two different, valid, and equally powerful answers to the question of his heart. Deep in the obsidian heart of the Nexus, a wound festered. Master Org was not dead, but he was dimmy. Nished in a way he had not been since his first, ancient defeat. The destruction of his nemesis avatar had not just been a physical loss, it had been a philosophical one. A significant portion of his own essence, his own being, had been invested in that form, and its utter annihilation by a force of pure, harmonious creation had sent a shockwave of spiritual trauma back to him. His shadowy form was frayed, indistinct. The two crimson points of his eyes flickering like dying embers. Jindrax and Toxica grovelled before him, their own forms crackling with residual energy from the Animarium's rebirth. They were terrified, not of their master's rage, but of his silence. Finally, the voice came, not as a grinding pressure, but as a weak, venomous whisper. Less than it is not a warrior. It is not a god. It is a fulcrum. It uses the weight of the world against itself. Greater than a new kind of cunning, born of absolute, soul-shaking fear, entered his thoughts. Less than force has failed. Subtlety has failed. Conceptual warfare has failed. We cannot attack the fulcrum. We cannot attack the lever. So, we will poison the ground on which the fulcrum rests. Greater than. His gaze seemed to turn downwards, past the Nexus, past the crust of the earth. Towards the bustling, oblivious world of humanity. Less than he protects them. He draws strength from them. His new allies are human. So we will turn his precious humanity against him. We will not send monsters of pollution that they can fight. We will send whispers. We will find the cracks in their own society, their fear, their greed, their ambition. We will give their own worst impulses a little push. He cannot fight an enemy that wears a human face. He cannot save a world that is determined to save itself from him. Greater than. NORAD Command, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The air in the underground bunker was thick with the smell of stale coffee and panicked sweat. General Marcus Thorne, a man whose face seemed to be carved from granite and disappointment, stared at the main strategic display. For the past 12 hours, every satellite, every sensor array, every deep space telescope on the planet had been screaming in unison. "Give me the report again, Doctor," Thorne growled, his voice a low rumble of contained disbelief. "And this time, try to make it sound like it belongs in this reality." Dr. Aris Thorne, his estranged son and the lead astrophysicist on the project, ran a trembling hand through his already disheveled hair. "The data is unequivocal, General. 12 hours ago, we detected a multi-spectrum energy event of unknown origin. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a gamma-ray burst. The energy signature was biological, coherent, almost alive." He tapped a few commands into his console, and a complex, beautiful, fractal pattern of light filled the main screen. "This is the event's energy waveform. It's more complex than a human genome." He took a deep breath. The event lasted 3.7 seconds. In that time, the hole in the Antarctic ozone layer completely repaired itself. Global atmospheric carbon levels dropped by 4%. The Pacific garbage patch dissolved. It's just gone. Ocean acidification levels have reverted to what they were in the 1980s. General, whatever happened up there, it didn't just save the world. It healed it. General Thorne stared at the screen, his military mind unable to process a weapon that caused peace, a bomb that created life. His eyes narrowed, suspicion his only refuge in the face of the impossible. Where did it originate? Aris pointed to a blinking red dot on the global map, a spot that seemed to be hovering in the sky just off the coast of California. Nowhere, and everywhere, the signal's point of origin appears to be geographically non-existent. It's in our airspace, but it's not in our dimension. He paused, then looked at his father, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying, exhilarating idea. "It's a message, Dad. Someone, or something, just rang the dinner bell and announced that humanity is no longer the biggest kid on the playground. And they've proven they can be a benevolent God. The question we have to ask ourselves now is, what happens if we make them an angry one?" Back in the chamber of still waters, Lyra the archivist appeared. She did not walk through a door, but simply stepped out of a shimmering distortion in the air, her moon-colored hair and dust-mote robes a stark, pale contrast to the chamber's blue-silver light. She looked at Shayla and Taylor, her ancient, parchment-colored eyes holding a new, urgent light. "The threads have been rewoven," she said, her voice the soft rustle of turning pages. His arrival was a stone tossed into a still pond. His victory was the draining of the pond and its replacement with an ocean. The story of this world no longer flows along its old path. She looked down at Naruto's floating form. He is not just a visitor anymore. By channeling the life and memory of the Animarium, he has written his own soul into its source code. He is a part of its foundation now. If he were to die, a part of this world would die with him. A fundamental truth would be erased. Shayla's hand went to her heart. The thought was a physical blow. But there is a new danger, Lyra continued, her gaze becoming distant, as if she were reading a text that only she could see. His victory sent a ripple not just through our world, but through the worlds of men. They have seen the light of a new dawn, and they will be drawn to it, some with hope, others with greed. The next battle will not be fought for the soul of the Animarium, but for the soul of humanity itself. And it will not be a battle he can win with his fists. As she spoke these final, prophetic words, the golden light around Naruto began to pulse, brighter and faster. A low hum filled the chamber, the sound of a great engine coming back to life. Slowly, his eyes fluttered open. The first thing he saw was not the ceiling, not the water, but the two faces looking down at him. Shayla's, luminous and transcendent, filled with a love as vast and patient as time itself. And Taylor's, sharp and grounded, her blue eyes filled with a fierce, protective loyalty that was as real and solid as the earth. He felt their hands on him, their spirits intertwined with his own. He was weak, his body an aching void, but his soul was full. For the first time, he was not alone in his power. He was not a lonely god. He was an anchor, and these were his harbors. A slow, tired smile touched his lips. His voice, when it came, was a rough, quiet rasp, but it held the weight of the new world he had just forged. And it was directed at both of them. An acknowledgement of the new, complicated, beautiful truth of their lives. Well, he said, this is going to be complicated. Chapter 11 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.